Hello everyone. And welcome to a new story. What if Deku became a demon? If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share. It helps motivate me to make more. I did not write this story. The original writer is Professional Ranter. Please support them. Now let us dive in. He won't so long as he dodges. Those were the final words that Izuku heard before Katsuki pulled the pin on his gauntlet. As the explosion rushed towards him, he felt pain, unlike anything he had ever felt before. As he slammed through concrete walls, he felt rebar stab into him as his skin burned. His bones snapped everywhere and in many places stuck out from his flesh. His sight left him as he felt his legs shatter. Blood quickly began to fill his lungs as he finally stopped moving. The momentum of the explosion had nearly sent him outside of the training building with his head hanging out. Izuku's heart stopped beating as blood pooled around him. Young Midoriya. Young Midoriya, do you hear me? My boy, please, say something. All Might's voice cracked as he saw his successor and son in all but blood lying on the ground surrounded by his own blood. Bakugo stepped out of the smoking hallway and stopped as he stared at the still body of Izuku, twisted and broken. What? Fuck. You just had to fucking ruin my chances, you useless Deku. He only cared that he would most likely be expelled from UA for what he had just done, not the fact that he just murdered someone in cold blood. Ida began to try and get Bakugo's attention to find out what just happened when a loud whine escaped Izuku's still warm corpse. His eyes, once lifeless, became a bright glowing green light, a beacon. His broken body twisted and moved as in the distance an anguished cry could be heard. His body began to rise back to its feet as his bones continued to release sickening snaps. Deku, what's going on? The voice of Izuku's first friend in UA rang in his ear, but all she got was a low-pitched groan as the now living corpse set its eyes on the person who killed it. A growl not unlike that of a wild beast escaped its throat as in a flash it punched Bakugo. The bones snapped with a sickening crunch as the green energy that came from Izuku's lifeless eyes began to glow from his open wounds. His body began to shift as the costume that his mother had made him began to tear, destroying it further after Bakugo's attacks. With small spurts of blood, the bones that had been sticking out of Izuku's right hand began to return inside the flesh as it mended itself into a twisted clawed hand. Izuku's mouth opened and with a screech that chilled everyone who heard it rushed forward and kicked Bakugo out of the building. His back began to shift and deform as his body pushed the debris that had been embedded into him onto the ground. Running forward with sickening crunches, Izuku's living corpse headbutted Bakugo as he began to enter the building again. Izuku's left leg began to deform as it bent backward at the knee as his feet shifted, breaking his shoes as large talons replaced his toes with a new one growing at the back of his foot. What the hell are you doing, you stupid Deku? Trying to play dead to fuck with me? Well, it won't. Izuku cut him off with a bellowing roar that could be heard for miles, attracting the attention of many. Another roar louder than the one Izuku let out echoed in response. Izuku's shoulder blades snapped and broke as wings burst from his back with the sounds of tearing cloth and flesh accompanying it. Whatever was possessing Izuku's corpse gave them several experimental flaps as it walked towards Bakugo with its unhealed leg limping behind it. Tenya and Ochako came out of the training building only to stop dead at the sight before them. Their friend was twisted and deformed with limbs entirely foreign to his body that only minutes ago had been fine. The creature began to flap its wings and hovered off the ground. It growled at Bakugo and flew at him faster than he could react. With a clawed slap, Bakugo was sent flying across the ground before he began to roll until landed in another building, leaving a large hole in the wall. More of Izuku's right arm began to twist and deform as it became longer. The skin began to blacken and gray with a ring forming on his forearm with several lines running all over it, much like his changed leg and new wings. His jaw, which had been dislocated in the explosion, opened with a sickening creak as Bakugo came out of the building dazed. A shriek not unlike that of a massive bird of prey came hurling from his throat as he flew towards his target. As he flew, he tucked his wings in slightly and began to spin in the air like a moving drill, with the two small spikes that rested at the elbows of his wings pointed straight at Bakugo. Before he could land his hit, All Might came rushing in and grabbed Bakugo out of the way. Young Midoriya. Please, tell me if you can hear me? Anything? All Might got no response as Izuku's other arm began to shift and mirror that of his right arm. The long muscled arms dangled in the air as Izuku's dead stare looked through All Might and at Bakugo, who stood behind the number one hero much to his chagrin. I can take care of fucking Deku. Before All Might could say anything in response, Izuku flew at him. Before he would hit his mentor, he pivoted around him and kicked Katsuki with his broken leg. The bone snapped loudly and Tenya felt sick. It began to mend itself as it mirrored his left leg. The fabric at the base of his spine began to shift as Izuku screamed to the heavens as he clawed at his head. All Might tried to go to his successor to help him, but the suddenly grown tail knocked him out of the training city as Izuku's claws left marks on his head as 10 horns began to grow from his head like a crown. His jaw placed itself back where it belonged as his teeth began to elongate and sharpen. Eraserhead, Midnight, and Present Mic ran onto the scene only to stop as they witnessed Izuku's body continue to contort as the pointed tail lashed out, leaving small holes in the ground when it hit. The horns continued to grow as his face grew gray with hints of green where his freckles once were. Knew I should have expelled him. Aizawa lashed his capture scarf out and bound Izuku's arms and wings to his body. He fell to the ground with a thud as he continued to move erratically. The 3 heroes stepped forward, but they soon regretted that decision. Izuku's heart began to beat again as he vomited up the last of the debris that resided within his body. His eyes remained glowing as the capture scarf wrapped around him began to shift about. With a roar that could rival Yamada's quirk, his wings tore through the capture scarf as they grew 4 times their original size. Izuku's knees broke as his legs became ramrod straight. He bent his knees forward as he got up, and then they bent backward once he was standing. Aizawa's capture scarf was useless now as the cloth fell to the ground. Izuku's eyes fell on the 3 teachers. He found his next targets. Yamada let out one of his iconic sonic screeches at Izuku as Aizawa got his knife out. Izuku covered his ears in pain as they began to bleed slightly. The screaming stopped as Present Mic needed to take a breath, but that was all Izuku needed to rush forward and kick the radio hero down the street. He knocked Aizawa back with one of his wings and knocked Kayama away with his fist as he turned his head every which way in an effort to keep track of all those who would attack him. Midoriya! 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 Tenya and Ochako tried to reach their friend, but they were pulled back by Present Mic as he let out another sonic blast at Izuku, who screamed out in pain as he felt his ears rupture. Blood began to leak through his fingers and Yamada's eyes widened in horror. Before he could stop though, Izuku tore his ears off of his head with a pained roar. The 2 pieces of flesh fell to the ground as everyone looked on in horror at the self-mutilation. Tenya and Ochako wanted to go help him, but Midnight let out her sleeping gasp before they could. Izuku covered his mouth as he flapped his wings rapidly and dispelled the gas just as quickly as it had come. His glowing eyes narrowed at the rated R hero before dashing forward and knocking her through several buildings with his tail. Aizawa rushed forward with his knife at the ready to incapacitate his wings when Izuku pivoted and bit down on the knife, shattering it. Aizawa was clawed in his face and one of his eyes was covered with blood. Some of the lines that ran all across Izuku's new body began to glow green as the rings on each of his forearms began to shift. Izuku disappeared in a blur and reappeared in front of Present Mic as he tore his directional speaker off of his neck. It fell to the ground in pieces as Yamada covered his mouth in fear of using his quirk now. Midoriya? Izuku turned to the source of the voice to find Tenya and Ochako staring at him in clear concern. They began to step forward, but Izuku growled lightly. They stepped back and raised their hands placatingly and Izuku's posture relaxed. "We aren't going to hurt you," Tenya tried to assure him. "Yeah, we just want to help." Ochako stepped forward carefully, not wanting to scare him. As Izuku seemed to calm down, Bakugo came barreling forward with his other gauntlet now full and ready to be used. "Don't think we're done yet, Deku." Before Bakugo could pull the pin and blow up the now much larger Izuku, a large mass slammed into him, sending him flying. Izuku's ears, which had regrown into more pointy versions of the original, picked up small screams in the distance. Bakugo got to his feet in anger but stopped as he looked upon the woman before him. "Auntie?" Inko Midoriya stood tall, towering over all that was in her vicinity. She had 4 sets of horns, with one set framing her cheeks while the other 3 of various sizes formed a large crown over her head. Her eyes, which normally showed kindness, burned with hatred as they glowed a faint green. She was well-muscled and sculpted like an Amazonian. She lacked the wings and tail that her son had, but with how she held herself it was clear that wasn't a problem. "You dare to murder my son, force his true form to the surface, and for it to twist and deform his body. I should have killed you after the first time you beat him, laws of Lucifer be damned. I have ruined all those who dared to hurt my son and I will not stop now." Inko raised her hand up and various demonic ruins began to appear as she chanted in a language unknown to all those present except for her. Before she could finish though, she heard a loud thump as Izuku fell to the ground. "Midoriya!" Tenya and Ochako rushed towards him as Inko's chanting stopped. Her eyes bore upon her son and she rushed forward to look upon him. "Oh my sweet blood angel, what has happened to you?" Inko looked upon both Tenya and Ochako for a moment before making a decision. A wide pentagram circle appeared beneath the group of four as it glowed red. You two have been chosen by the Duchess of Fortune, a denizen of hell, and advisor to Lucifer. Until my son is healthy you shall guard him and heal him. In return, I shall grant your family's luck and fortune. Inko's eyes turned upon Katsuki, who was frozen to the spot. Know this, Katsuki Bakugu, you may have an angel guarding you, but I shall tear their wings from their body and make them watch as I kill you. Your days are numbered. With a bright red flash, the small group disappeared, leaving the rest to stare at the pentagram burned into the ground. Lucifer. Inko started running the moment the circle stopped glowing. Tenya and Ochako looked around to find them in a lavish hallway made up of various shades of red. Lucifer Morningstar, show yourself. Inko carried Izuku in her arms as she stormed through the castle. All servants that saw her scurried out of her way in fear of being trampled. Izuku's two friends quickly decided to follow her and stay close. Lucifer Morningstar, the fallen angel, if you do not show yourself I will personally destroy this entire castle brick by fucking brick until I find you. Inko. What the fuck are you doing here? A demon with pure white skin, blonde hair, a mouth full of sharp teeth, and pupils resembling that of a snake came out of the room in a very disheveled suit. Where are your healers? Inko ignored his question. Why do you dash? His words died on his lips as Inko turned around to face him, revealing Izuku's breathing but still form in her arms. Come with me. Any sense of mirth in his voice died as he led them through the castle to a small room. It hasn't been used for quite some time since Charlie moved out. I'll call them in and summon Lilith. What happened? As he got to work, Inko began to explain the story, with Tenya and Ochako slowly gaining a sense of horror as they heard what their friend had gone through. Should have called you back after the first few years up there. What's with the two humans? Lucifer pointed the two to the side of the bed while he hooked Izuku up to the heart monitor. They are his friends, true friends. I have put them under contract to watch over him until he is back to health. Both turned to stare at Tenya as he slightly shrunk back in fear. What is wrong with Midoriya? Demons don't normally have that coloration for their skin. Well, at least demons that were born from denizens of hell. Also Midoriya? Lucifer raised his eyebrow at Inko. I needed a fake family name. Before Ochako could ask her own question, the doors slammed open. A tall, slender, and very curvaceous woman walked into the room. She was taller than Lucifer but nowhere near Inko's height. The horns on her head certainly drew the two humans' attention. What has happened? The healer also finally arrived, running past Lilith and towards Izuku. Lilith Inko tried to say something but everything seemed to catch up to her and she began to let out gut-wrenching sobs as tears pooled from her eyes. Lilith quickly walked over and gave her a small hug that, while didn't even come close to encompassing her entire body, did convey the intention. It's okay, little sister. Let it out. Tenya and Ochako watched in utter astonishment as one demon cried and the other attempted to soothe her. Lucifer began to explain to his wife what Inko told him, but his eyes were focused on his nephew. His heart stopped beating and his body the weeping mother couldn't finish as she devolved into more howls of anguish that rocked the castle. Her big sister continued to hug her as tears fell to the floor. It's going to be all right, he'll be all right. Lilith sent a subtle glare at the healer, conveying that if Izuku didn't survive, unemployment would be the least of his worries. His heart is beating once more. It seems as though something worked alongside his demonic heritage to keep him alive. However, his body is currently adjusting and needs time and rest. The healer scratched the back of their head in confusion. They had never seen something like this before. Lucifer looked at the healer for a moment before letting out a sigh. We'll need to figure out what the unknown variable is. Inko, you said he began to exhibit what to the mortals seemed to be a quirk. Inko's sobs and lessened to whimpers. I thought it was his heritage coming into play. It is possible, but I will not risk him on a possibility. You too. Lucifer pointed at Tenya and Ochako, who straightened up in fear. Did anything of note happen while he was in that feral state? All Might was acting like he knew him and didn't want to hit him at all. Ochako admitted, talking before her thoughts caught up to her mouth. I'll be sending Stolas to look into a possible connection between All Might and my nephew. In the meantime, he'll need another place to stay as he heals. The castle is too dangerous for him. Lucifer rubbed at his chin and thought of where would be safest to place Izuku. Charlie's hotel might be a safe bet, my dear. They only have one person staying there. Lilith pointed out to her husband. Inko rubbed the tears from her eyes as she looked at her sister in confusion. Charlotte has a hotel? It's a recent endeavor of hers. She believes that the sinners of hell can be redeemed. It would also be a safe space for Izuku's two human friends to reside. I don't think I need to explain how two humans walking around hell can spell certain death. Tenya gulped at the implications. Lucifer began working on a portal to Charlie's hotel while Lilith handed Inko a large handkerchief that most would mistake for a tablecloth. Before you two begin, do you have any questions? Just a couple hundred. For starters, what the fuck? Ochako was finally beginning to freak out while Tenya looked at Izuku. We are training to be heroes and Izuku needs our help. How could we call ourselves heroes if we can't help our friend? His thoughts immediately turned to his brother and what he would do. You mentioned that while we would be looking over Izuku, our families would welcome great luck and fortune. What did you mean by that? For your family, Tenya, their fame will rise and your brother will go up in the rankings with the agency getting access to new funds that will turn it into something new. Ochako, the debt that your family faces will be paid in full and they will gain more jobs in construction. Inko explained the benefits PF the contract she had put them under. Is there anything we should know about hell? Time here moves faster than up there. It was a measure we put in place to have some semblance of order due to how many mortals die on average a day. One day up there is a week and a half down here. Ochako began to calm down as she grasped at the fact that her family's debt would be paid in full. Can we have some way to communicate with them? Just so they won't freak out too much. I can prepare something for you. Inko's eyes suddenly began to glow. However, if your communications with them put my son at risk, I will torture you till the end of time. The two quickly began to nod in fear. Portal's ready. I'll get you some books on demon biology so you can care for him. Lucifer stepped through the portal first and was welcomed with the sight of Charlie staring at it in both confusion and slight terror. She was the spitting image of both her parents. Her girlfriend Vagatha stood with her spear at the ready. The moth demon stood in front of his daughter. Behind them, reclining on a couch, was the famous porn star Angel Dust with a popsicle dripping slightly onto his fur. To Lucifer's surprise, the radio demon Alastor was there as well. His eyes held great fascination for what was currently happening. There were two other demons that Lucifer didn't recognize. Tenya and Ochako came in behind him with Lilith following them. Confusion was becoming evident at the sight of two humans. Then Inko ducked in through the portal with Izuku in her arms. Recognition flashed in Charlie's eyes. Auntie Inko? Any semblance of fear vanished as the Princess of Hell rushed forward to her aunt whom she hadn't seen for a very long time. She soon stopped though as she saw Izuku in her aunt's arms. Who's that? Charlie, this is your cousin Izuku. He was born while your aunt was up in the mortal world observing the changes they had experienced. Unfortunately, several future residents of the castle's dungeons have hurt him and his heart stopped while up there. Inko grabbed these two humans, friends of his, to watch over him as he recovers. They will need to stay here for the time being since the moment it is discovered that Inko not only has returned but also has a son, assassins will more than likely attack. A dark aura emanated from Inko at the thought of any assassins trying to hurt her baby. We can set up some rooms. Alastor recently decided to sponsor the hotel and gave us 2 new employees so we can easily look after him. What's his name? Charlie took the news of both having a cousin and the bare minimum of what happened to him quite well. If you didn't know her well. To those that did, it was clear that she was bottling up her rage. Vaggie hadn't seen her like this since the last time she had talked with her parents when Lucifer had ridiculed the hotel. Oh Charlotte, always the considerate one. Just point to the room and I'll take Izuku there. That's his name, Izuku. Charlie led her aunt up the stairs as Vaggie stared in absolute terror. The killer of billions, she's returned. Once Inko had laid Izuku on the bed, she looked at Charlie. Her niece clearly had questions. What do you want to know? Charlie didn't say anything for a few moments, trying to figure out what was most important to her to know. What's he like? Inko smiled softly as she tucked some of Izuku's hair behind one of his horns. He is one of the kindest people that you can meet. He has a heart bigger than anything and wants people to be happy. When he told me he wanted to become a hero, he said it was to save people. I don't know how the reveal of what he truly is or what happened to him will change that. Charlie gained a hopeful gleam in her eyes. Do you think he would support my idea for redemption? Inko looked at Charlie for a moment before letting out a sigh. Charlotte, you wish to redeem everyone in hell who was sent here. But not all of them deserve a second chance. Some of them ended up here because they did things in order to protect others that they cared about or to survive. Others did things because they were greedy or were simply bored. I think it's a good idea that has merit, but you have to understand that not everybody has the capacity to be good. But everybody deserves a chance. Charlie shot back. No, not everybody. What about those who raped children? Those who slaughtered countless people because they just felt like it? Those who committed cannibalism not because they had to but because they wanted to? Some of the people here in hell do indeed deserve another chance and you should help them. But don't try and redeem all of these people when so many of them are here for truly the right reasons. Inko kept her voice calm. She knew that when Charlie focused on a project she would see it complete no matter what anyone said. Charlie was silent as she mulled over what her aunt had said. A small smile grew on Inko's face. You have a big heart full of kindness, but you have to know where to direct it if you truly want to help people. Izuku would most likely support the endeavor though. Charlie looked up at that, surprised but hopeful. He would? He is incredibly smart and sees the best in many. But that is partly what led to what happened to him. His kindness was taken advantage of and he suffered for it. That is most likely why your father doesn't support this endeavor. Your wish to redeem everyone because of your kindness could get you hurt or worse, dead. He loves you with every fiber of his being and couldn't bear it if something happened to you. Inko began to leave the room as she ducked under the doorway. Charlie didn't miss what Inko said about her father but she focused on something else. You said it was partly what led to this, what was the other part? Inko looked back into the room at Charlie. That would be the angel that watches over the brat that stopped his heart. They shielded him from all punishments and never let him face the consequences of his actions. That brat made the choice to do what he did, but the angel is the one who has not let karma do its work. Inko left and went down to the lobby where Lucifer and Lilith still were. Izuku is upstairs on a bed. These two humans are under contract with me and thus under my protection. If any harm comes to them you shall answer to me. With the warning out of the way, she ducked into the portal with her brother-in-law and sister following behind her. The portal closed soon after. So who was the tall chick? Vaggie facebombed and let out a loud groan at Angel Dust's question. How do you not know who Duchess Inko is? Angel Dust shrugged, told ya, not into politics. Vaggie let out a sigh laden with frustration. She is Lucifer's first ever advisor and the reason he and Lilith are married. Charlie told me about it a bunch of times on how Inko's big sister was interested in Lucifer so she set them up on a blind date back when we didn't have the hierarchy and the rest is history. That's it? She also used to perform the purges before the angels took over, by herself. She kept Hell's population in check for many centuries and is the reason time down here moves faster than up there. She is skilled in magics of all the pantheons and has fought against many other gods and monsters. Still not ringing a bell. Oh, for fuck's sake, she owns the Al Casino. Vaggie yelled at Angel Dust. Wait, seriously? Damn, Valentino's been trying to make a play in the gambling business, but that casino always beat him out. Vaggie facebombed. You are ridiculous. Tenya and Ochako stood to the side having been temporarily forgotten. They both gulped loudly at the implications of Inko's strength. Lucifer's castle. Once Inko had returned she had discarded the rags of her earthly clothes, torn apart from her transformation, and put on a deep green three-piece suit. She adjusted the cuffs as she stepped into a grand hall with a large table in the middle of it. Lucifer often held meetings with the various rulers of Hell there. She used her magic to shrink herself down to a smaller size and took a seat. Two small bowls were placed in front of her, one was empty while the other was full of small black rocks. She picked one of them up and began to weave it through the fingers of her hand as the other two members of her family took their own seats. Now before we begin on revenge we do need to speak about what you have learned while in the mortal world. Why did the humans begin gaining strange powers? Lucifer looked at Inko expectantly. The mortals have taken to calling them quirks. Their society has drastically changed with heroes being the prominent enforcers of the law and villains fighting against them. Of course, there is still much corruption and while racism has faded out it was quickly replaced with quirkism. It is essentially the same as racism but the discrimination is based around the quirk of the individual. From those considered villainous to those with extreme mutative quirks to even some considered best only in a sexual manner, there is no short supply of it. Inko wasn't able to share everything in her reports given just how much she had to investigate. Did you learn of their origin? A combination of God playing about and a few demonic contracts to ensure the survival of some children. I looked for those types of things and I found them easily. However, I wasn't fully able to finish that investigation as a mass hysteria from people without quirks against people with quirks began. It's entirely possible information was lost because of that. Damn it, we'll need to communicate with the council to get more information then. Lucifer gritted his teeth, already not looking forward to it given the angel watching over Izuku's killer most likely came from heaven, the contracts make sense at least, but why was God playing about? Best guess is that they wanted to introduce some chaos like they did back when the other pantheons were created by them. They wanted humans to have new changes, so a new factor was introduced. Inko shrugged. Given how many Quark people died during the early day of Quarks, she wasn't entirely certain. Inko let the small rock roll into the palm of her hand before crushing it. She opened it to reveal a diamond. She put it into the empty bowl and picked up another piece of coal. With that out of the way, let's begin discussing how we shall handle Katuski Bakugu. You said his name was? Lucifer leaned forward, considering this far more important. Inko grit her teeth. Until we can find the angel guarding him, we can do nothing. I will rest down here for a few days' time to allow my magic to become reacquainted with my body once more and then begin his torture. Do you have any guess as to the age range of the angel? Lilith asked, already making plans to pull in a few favors owed to her. My guess is fairly young. They have shielded Bakugu from all consequences he could have ever faced in his life, preventing him from learning a lesson. The other tormentors, I simply focus karma onto them and let them learn lessons, with a few select ones I've marked for the dungeons. Inko couldn't be certain though. The angel was good at covering their tracks. Lilith leaned forward, the scowl that had adorned her face since they had returned from her daughter's hotel deepened. Some may blame what he did on the angel. They blocked all incoming negative karma and increased the amount of positive karma he experienced. While it is true they are partially to blame, the brat still made his own choices despite everything he has learned in school and other experiences. He made his choices and must suffer the consequences. Inko dropped a newly made diamond into the bowl before grabbing a small handful of coal and crushing it all into the precious gem. While I may not be able to touch him, there are other ways to torture him. Has my casino been well managed? Stolas has looked after it most days, and on the days that he can't, I take over. It remains the go-to gambling location in hell, Lilith assured her. Inko gave a small nod of thanks to her big sister before the doors slammed open with a burst of wind. An owl demon walked into the room dressed in clothes that would most commonly be seen on English royalty in the human realm with grace. He let a wide smile adorn his face as he laid his eyes on Inko. Oh, Inko, it's been far too long. Octavia has missed you so, and we really do need to have another duel of magic at some point. I'm certain I'll be able to break out Tai this time. The bowl of diamonds was given one more gem as the bowl that held the coal was empty. Inko got up from her seat and let the magic that she had used to shrink herself go, allowing her natural height to return. She still towered over Stolas despite it being a long time since last she had been able to meet in person with her friendly rival. She brought Stolas in for a hug before allowing him to take his own seat. Instead of shrinking down again, she simply used her magic to make the seat bigger for herself. Now, why have you called me here, Lucifer? My nephew is currently in an undead state. I'm certain I don't need to remind you of the last time we experienced a situation like this. Stola's eyes widened slightly before they darted over to Inko, who nodded. Hell's gates were almost destroyed. Thankfully his heart started up again, although how that is we have yet to discover. There is an unknown factor that remains up in the realm of humans, and you are to go up there when Inko does to investigate. Inko quickly took over the conversation. He is the #1 hero of Japan, known as the symbol of peace, all might. His real name is Toshinori Yagi, and he has some unknown relationship with my son. I need you to discover what it is so we can factor it into Izuku's treatment and recovery. It will be done, old friend. Would you like to see how your casino is doing? I would love to. The two left as Lucifer and Lilith began to converse about the news of Quarks. Inko and Stolas sat in the Owl Demon's limo as it drove along the streets of hell. Inko stared out at how the city of the Pride Ring had changed since she last saw it. She looked at her friend from the side of her eye as she spoke. Are you still married to Stella? Yes, Stolas answered casually, already knowing this question was coming. Inko turned to her rival to arch an eyebrow at him. The only good thing I've seen come out of that marriage is Octavia. Why would you stay with that bitch? Stolas waved his hand. It's complicated. It was an arranged marriage between your parents and hers. With the power you have, it can easily be nulled, Inko pointed out. Stolas folded his arms. Why do you ask? I can smell an imp on you, Inko pointed at her nose. We have servants who dash his semen. She smirked at him as his answer died on his lips. Stolas stalled before letting out a sigh. His name is Blitzo, he works out of someplace here in the city. It used to be just a little arrangement where he would have sex with me and I'd let him use my grimoire to do his little business. Then you caught feelings for him. Stolas smiled softly. He makes me feel special, like I'm more than just my position and power. Oh, when he Stolas began to go into graphic detail about what he and Blitza would do in the bedroom, much to Inko's growing expression of disturbance. And he bends me over his knee and raises his hand and please stop talking before I decide to risk walking to the casino. Stolas stopped, but it was clear he held no shame given the wide smirk he had. We may not yet be able to beat each other in a duel, but I at least have you beat in the disturbing department. I practice torture of the body, you practice torture of the mind. We are both at the top of our game in the disturbing department, just in different categories. Stolas pointed his finger playfully at Inko. But I'm able to disturb you while you have yet to disturb me. Inko let out a small laugh. Stolas had always been capable of making her laugh even during the toughest of times. The limo began to go over a bridge as it made its way towards a small aisle completely dominated by a series of buildings, with the largest one seeming to be designed after Inko's horns, with a building in between them. The limo parked and the two got out of the vehicle, with Inko letting go of the shrinking spell and returning to her full height. They walked toward what seemed to be the main casino of the island and opened the doors. And shove it up your ass? To one of the employees being held back by another. She appeared to be human if her right arm being seemingly made out of shadows wasn't apparent. She had blonde hair and wore what appeared to be an English police officer's uniform, with it being a bit tight around the chest area and seemingly stained red. She was being held back by two imps from attacking another demon who had a bleeding nose. Inko let out a sigh as she raised her hand up and a cane appeared in it. It was ornate with a large blood ruby as its head, with runes running all across its body. Inko slammed the cane on the ground, letting a shockwave out that stopped what everyone was doing. The blonde looked towards the source and her angered expression quickly became happy. Ma'am. Inko walked forward as the two imps let go of the girl, who quickly dashed forward to stand in front of her boss. Her back was straight and she quickly brought a closed fist over her heart and bowed briefly before returning to attention. Sarah's, what is going on? I was just complimenting her and she I didn't ask you. Speak again and I will remove your tongue. The demon that Sarah's had been trying to attack quickly shut his mouth as the two imps walked back to their jobs while shooting him dirty looks. I was finishing making my rounds around the aisle when he decided to grab me. He said he would like to fuck me, among several other things you probably do not wish to know. I allowed my anger to get the best of me. Inko looked down at her head of security before reaching out her hand. A few runes appeared and the demon was brought into it. He soon began to scream as the hand holding onto the top of his head began to glow a deep demonic red. His body began to turn to ash from the feet and soon his screams stopped. Only ash remained as Inko looked about. The casino will be closing for the rest of the day. Leave or Sarah's shall be feasting on your blood. Sarah's, gather the others, we are to have a meeting. Understood. Inko walked further into the casino with her cane every so often tapping on the floor. The rest of the customers quickly began leaving, with some needing convincing that the employees were more than willing to give. Sarah's watched as they did so while Stolas walked up to her. She always did favor you. When did she get back? Sarah's asked, smiling softly as she looked at Inko's retreating form. Recently, she may have to leave every once in a while to return to the mortal realm for some business that she has to attend to, but not for as long as she did. Sarah's looked as though she wanted to say more but waited until the rest of the guests were gone before voicing her thoughts. Did she have her kid? Yes, and he is why she has returned. You'll learn more at the meeting. I need to get going now, please give Inko my regards. Stolas quickly left, and once Sarah's had done a once-over of the building she quickly went to the others. Hour later. Those fucking bastards. Sarah slammed both of her fists onto the table as her teeth were shown to be razor-sharp like a predator. 3 other people sat around the table, a man in a trench coat with blonde hair, another man in a crimson coat and wide-brimmed hat, and a woman with a rapier. While 2 of them had similar expressions of rage, the man in the hat began to chuckle lightly. It has been a long time since we last saw you take revenge on somebody, it will prove to be very interesting. Alucard, will you shut up? What angel would interfere with karma in such a way? Integra, Alexander, that's enough. I have told each of you this so that you are aware of something very important. My son is currently in a state between being undead and alive. While revenge is an objective, his health takes priority. I may send any of you up to the realm of mortals for various things that will relate either to revenge or his recovery. Inko sat on a large seat with various depictions of beasts carved into it. She had the cane across her lap as she looked over each of them. I gave each of you a seat for what you did in curbing the problem of zombies and vampires in the world of the living. Alexander, I granted you a chance to continue your job of keeping demons in check by observing contracts that are done. Integra, I put you in charge of hunting down any demon that was idiotic enough to enter the world of the living. Alucard wished to continue being, as he called it, a fuck-mothering vampire, while Sarah simply wished for something new beyond the stale life she had begun to experience. I made each of you demons and a part of my inner circle for this reason. You keep the order of hell without being tied to some gang. Now, you will have a few other jobs for a time. Each of them nodded at Inko. At Charlie's hotel. Charlie was back in the lobby as she helped store away Tenya and Ochako's hero costumes. Once they had stated that they needed new outfits to wear, Charlie had asked Angel to go get some on the basis that he owed her one for the news fiasco. Tenya was wearing jeans that had been modified by Nifty to fit his legs. The clothes were pretty basic for Hell standards and not very revealing. So, you're Izuku's friends, where were you when he was murdered? Tenya and Ochako sat on a couch as Charlie looked over them. Despite her kind demeanor, she is still Lucifer's daughter. On another floor during the training exercise. We didn't know what was going on or that Mito, Izuku, had been seemingly murdered. He came back as an undead demon, something that nearly destroyed Hell the last time they were around. Auntie Inko may trust you, but you have yet to earn mine. Your little calls with the magic mirrors she set up in your rooms will be monitored until you earn my trust. On the landing above the stairs, Izuku walked out of his room. He was yawning as he rubbed at his eyes, with Alastor being the only one who noticed him being awake. As Izuku walked towards the stairs, he accidentally stepped on his tail and tripped when he jumped from the pain. Fuck. He fell down the stairs and landed in a heap with his face to the ground. Midoriya. Tenya and Ochako quickly got up and raced over to their friend, although Charlie got to him first. He let out a groan as he slowly got up. Ugh, what did I step on? As he looked up, he noticed a very different layout than the nurse's office of UA. Then he saw the people. Am I still asleep? As he got up, he noticed his hands and legs. His tail made itself apparent as it wiggled about and his wings flapped lightly. Izuku moved to scratch his head but felt the horns. Izuku, are you okay? Izuku looked at Tenya weirdly. Yeah, I'm doing fine, Ida. Why are you calling me by my first name? Izuku, a lot happened. Izuku turned to look at Ochako next. He was confused for a bit before realization shined in his eyes. Oh, I get it, this is just one of those fucking pranks Bakugo always pulls. I'm gonna pull on this horn and it'll come right off. As Izuku reached up, he muttered to himself, can't believe I actually thought I got some friends. Izuku had yet to notice Charlie, who had stepped back in order to not scare him with an unfamiliar face. As he pulled on the horn, his head went with it and he lightly winced in pain. Wow, he hasn't used this glue since he glued that sign to my forehead. He pulled at it harder but the horn didn't budge. Soon he was using both hands but it did nothing. Soon Ochako grabbed Izuku's hands to stop him from hurting himself. Izuku's eyes widened. This isn't a prank, is it? Charlie made herself known as Izuku grew a look of horror on his face. That wasn't a dream, I actually died. The boy promptly threw up. As Izuku stopped puking his guts out, he wiped his mouth and took a deep breath. I died. Tenya and Ochako moved forward to try and comfort their friend, but he stepped back. He tripped on his tail but caught himself on the railing of the stairs. I actually died. Izuku's voice was laden with disbelief and fear. Confusion rang through it alongside horror. I actually fucking died. He began to hyperventilate. His pupils shrank as he looked around wildly. Where am I? Izuku bolted from leaning on the railing as he ran to the doors. Charlie and his friends tried to stop him but he was too fast in his desperation. He slammed the doors open as Vaggie pulled Tenya and Ochako out of sight. Izuku breathed heavily as he looked up. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Why is it still beating? The few demons that walked by the hotel gave him weird looks as they walked along, but Izuku could only see the giant glowing red pentagram in the sky. What is happening? Panic was clear in how he moved and talked as he looked every which way trying to find some explanation. Izuku, please come back inside. Charlie came out of the hotel and held up her hands, trying to appear as non-threatening to Izuku as possible. It wasn't working. Izuku looked at Charlie in fear as he backed away from her. Who are you? How do you know my name? Where the hell am I? As he backed away from her, he stepped on his tail once more and fell to the ground. He finally noticed the wings on his back as he felt them shift beneath him. He crawled away from Charlie as she tried to help him up. Izuku scrambled to his feet and tried to run, but a shadow popped up and grabbed his leg. Now my dear friend, we can't have you run off. Alastor walked forward with a wide grin still present on his face. The veins on Izuku's left arm began to glow as he socked Alastor in the face, disorienting the radio demon enough for the shadow to let him go. Izuku bolted down the street as he looked all around him. Am I in hell? What did I do to get here? How am I alive? Charlie ran forward and tackled Izuku to the ground. He struggled against her, but she was deceptively strong. Izuku, please just listen to me. I'll explain everything back at the hotel, just come with me. Fuck no. You'll just lock me away or whatever you do as a demon. Izuku continued to struggle as more fear penetrated his heart. Alastor walked calmly towards the struggling pair and with more shadows than last time dragged them back to the hotel. His smile had only gotten wider since he was punched. As they entered Charlie's establishment, Vaggie closed the doors and locked them. Alastor removed Charlie's hold from Izuku and restrained him on one of the sofas as he continued to struggle. Midori, Izuku, please calm down. You aren't in any danger. Ochako tried to put her hand on Izuku's shoulder, but with his thrashing, she could barely touch him. I am in fucking hell, how the fuck am I not in danger? Izuku spat out as he tried to free himself. Your mom, she wouldn't have brought you here if she thought you were in danger. Charlie pointed out, hoping that mentioning Inko would calm him down. Izuku became very still as he slowly turned his head to look at Charlie. Then he began to thrash about, even more than he was before. If you laid a single fucking finger on Mom, I will rip your spine out of your ass. Kinky. That stopped Izuku's rampage against his restraints. He, alongside Tenya and Ochako, looked at Angel Dust with absolute shock. Am I high or something? Izuku muttered that to himself as Vaggie facepalmed at the spider demon's remark. I didn't hurt Auntie Inko. Izuku looked upon Charlie. His breathing was steadying, but he still looked ready to jump up and run. Why did you call Mom that? 10 minutes later. Izuku was free of his restraints as he held his hands together and up to his face. He processed everything he had just been told, but none of it added up. Okay, I've got about a few dozen thousand questions. First of all, what the hell am I? You are a full-blooded demon, although we don't currently know what type, Charlie answered. What do you mean by type? Izuku raised an eyebrow. Well, for those who were once humans, there are so many different types that it's impossible to count them all. You, however, were born from a native of hell. While for those like us, there is still some variety, like with the hellhounds and imps, your biology doesn't match up. Izuku's newly learned cousin explained. Izuku processed what Charlie said for a moment. Alright, okay, now, you are my cousin. Who are your parents? Lucifer and Lilith Morningstar. Fucking Satan? I'm related to the devil himself? Izuku almost jumped up, but Alastor's shadows kept him in place. Yes. Who is Mom related to? My mom. Auntie Inko is her little sister. Okay, fine, my mom is the little sister to the Queen of Hell, fine. Izuku planned to process that information later. She's also the advisor to my father. Izuku stalled for a moment before throwing his hands up in exasperation. What else does she do? She owns the top casino in Hell. It's a little while off the coast of the city, Charlie replied to the question calmly. Okay then, fine, alright, whatever. Who's my father? Izuku asked a question that he'd started wondering once Charlie had managed to explain the basics of everything to him. You don't have one. What? Izuku pronounced each letter in that word as he looked at Charlie, clearly demanding an explanation. Auntie Inko used several combined rituals from the Norse, Celtic, Roman, Mayan, and many other pantheons to become pregnant with you. Gonna gloss over the fact that the other pantheons of myth and legend exist. He'd try and understand that at a later time. You're telling me my mother created me by combining several different types of magic. Is she some sort of wizard? She's considered to be one of the best magic practitioners ever. Her manipulation of karma is second to none. Izuku decided to ignore the fact that his mother was considered one of the greatest magic users in favor of the second thing Charlie had mentioned. What do you mean by karma? Karma is what judges if someone goes to heaven, hell, Valhalla, or any of the other afterlives. Hell just happens to be the busiest one of them all by a mile. Your mom manipulates karma around her targets to either cause positive karma, which was supposed to be a gradual process, or negative karma. It essentially causes several good or bad days to happen in one day. Starting to wonder how she didn't know what was going on at Aldera, Izuku muttered to himself, not exactly trying to hide it given Ida and Ochako knew about some of what had happened there. She did. What? Izuku's voice boomed. She manipulated the karma of each of your tormentors as punishment for what they did to you. Except for Katsuki Bakugo. 3 questions. How did she know? How do you know all this? And why couldn't she affect Bakugo? Izuku held up 3 fingers for each of his questions, while counting down from 10 within his thoughts to try and remain as calm as possible. She knows the names of all gamblers. She told me as she set things up here. He has an angel watching over him. What the fuck, Izuku cursed, still trying to understand everything through his now shattered worldview. Why was she up there then while she was pregnant? It was an obvious question to ask. At the time hell was getting its first taste of quirks and my father needed to know what was going on up in the mortal world. Auntie Inko was the only person who could actually leave given how she managed her responsibilities. Before she left, Dad bound her to a few magical laws in order to keep the existence of hell secret. She however broke free from them when your heart stopped beating. Izuku winced at the mention of his death. He then pointed at his 2 friends. Why are Ida and Uraraka here? For that matter, why are they calling me by that name? Ochako stepped up to speak. Your mom put us under contract to watch over you until you recovered. In return, our family would experience great luck and fortune. As for the whole name thing, well, apparently the Midoriya family name is fake, so. Ochako trailed off as Izuku stared at her. I'm just gonna come back to that another day. Learning that his family name, a name he'd known his entire life, was fake was a shock. But he was dealing with so much new information right now he just couldn't process it. Anything else you think I should know? You already know about the whole undead part. Izuku winced once more but let out a small hum of confirmation. The only thing I can think of is that time down here moves faster than in the mortal realm. Faster how? Izuku wanted to know the time difference so he could remain aware of it. He would like to go back to the mortal world at some point, once he figures out how to. A day up there is a week and a half down here. So essentially 2 days up there is 3 weeks down here. Gotcha. Your mom actually performed the spell to do that. Izuku could only let out a heavy sigh at the final reveal from his cousin. Of course she did. Inko had let a few days in hell pass as she reacquainted herself with her magic. There was no short supply of demons to test her strength against with those that decided to break the rules of her casino. She's actually had to stop Alucard and Sarah's from going to the mortal realm to exact revenge for what was done to Izuku. Alexander, have you found anything that might tell us who the angel that watches over Katsuki Bakugo is? Alexander shook his head. None of the texts say anything. The executioners come to hell for the purge while others answer to prayers. I've looked into the known guardian angels but none of them have behaved like this one here. They truly must be a new one if they did something so idiotic. Inko held back a groan of frustration. Alucard and Sarah's are growing restless. They want to participate but a slaughter at this point in time will do nothing. Perhaps for the sports festival with targets. She stroked her chin as she thought of quite a few people she knew would attend this year's sports festival, so long as it wasn't cancelled. If I may, ma'am? Inko looked at Alexander and motioned for him to speak. We all were at your side as you worked to combine the rituals, we aided you in hunting the necessary creatures, we watched you fight Jormungandr to get one of his teeth. We were by your side as you became pregnant and waited every day for your letters reporting on the situation in the mortal world and how Izuku was doing. You gave us all a new chance at our mission to keep people safe from the supernatural. Both you and Izuku feel like family to us and to hear what has happened to him, it fills us with rage. Inko looked at Alexander for a moment before letting out a sigh. The 4 of you brought me such happiness, you all feel like my brothers and sisters. I know you wish to exact revenge at this very moment against him, but until we can get the angel guarding him to cease its actions we can do nothing to him. Alexander looked at the table with his hands clenched into fists. Directly, that got him to look up at Inko with a surprised look. I will be going to the mortal world to begin my revenge while Stolas looks into something that may help us with Izuku's health. I will also be handling some other business relating to the families of the 2 humans I put under contract to look over my son. Can you handle telling the others this news while I prepare? Should we expect you to return with anything? Alexander already knew the answer. Yes. They gave each other knowing smirks as Inko stood from her seat and exited the room with Alexander right behind her. She shrunk herself to fit into a limo that pulled in front of the casino. Stolas sat on the other side. Any recommendations for my disguise? Stolas was looking at a magazine of the current Japanese fashion trends. Don't look like a guy with a whole lot of money and make the hair feathers. It'll give you the appearance of having a mutative quirk. People were less likely to talk to someone with a mutative quirk, one of the things Inko had noticed when studying Quirkism. Stolas placed the magazine to the side. Ah, yes, thank you for the advice. What will you be doing while up there? The mortal day that Izuku died on has passed, so it is a new day for them. I'll be handling some things with the families of both Tenya and Ochako and then enacting the first step in my revenge against Bakugo. Inko gripped her forearm in order to keep her patience. Since I know the name of Toshinori Yagi, I should be able to find him and learn of his relation to Izuku. Octavia has heard of your return by the way and would love to see you. Stolas smiled softly as he thought of his daughter. Inko smiled. She can visit the casino after this, I'd love to see her as well. They soon arrived at Lucifer's castle and walked into the building. A servant escorted them to a room with a circle drawn on the ground and Lucifer sitting in a chair beside it. Ah, good to see you both here. Before we begin, please turn into your human disguises. Circles of ethereal blue flames surrounded both Stolas and Inko. As they died down, they revealed them both in human form. Stolas wore dress pants and a white button-up shirt with a vest over it, making him look like a bartender. His pupils were red and he had taken Inko's advice and had owl feathers for hair. He was tall for humans. Inko wore jeans with boots and a t-shirt with some mortal movie that Izuku and her had watched on it. She had a red and black checkered button-up shirt and the set of horns that framed her cheeks remained. She reached Stolas' shoulders. Perfect. Lucifer waved his hand and the circle came to life, forming a portal above it. The two stepped into it and came out to an alleyway. The portal closed behind them, leaving a symbol behind. I'll let you know when I'm done. Let's try and finish up before the end of the mortal day though. I'd prefer to not stay up here long. Inko adjusted her shirt as she got her bearings of where she was. Stolas nodded as he quickly performed a spell before walking off. Be safe, my friend. Inko set off and soon blended with the crowds. She made her way to a train station and got onto one and it took off. She stuck a hand into her pocket and used magic with it. In a few minutes, she got off the train and walked towards an apartment building a few blocks away. Walking into the building, she went towards the elevator and pushed a button. She moved as though she had been here before. The moment she got out of the elevator, she moved towards an apartment. She placed her ear to it and could hear faint crying. A simple rune unlocked the door and she entered the apartment to be met with the crying form of Ochako's mother. Miss Uraraka? The woman turned towards the voice. Her eyes were red and puffy. Who are you? How did you get in? I have news relating to your daughter. Inko's voice was calm, a direct contrast to the mother. What? Where is she? Is she okay? She rushed forward and gripped Inko's forearms in desperation. Few, please remove your hands from my arms. Inko preferred to keep this short. Trying to calm the woman down would only keep her here longer. Few stepped away in fear. How do you know my name? Inko smoothed out her sleeves. She is with my son at this time, helping him recover. Few quickly grasped the meaning of those words. Why, you took Ochako? Yes, I formed a contract with her where she is to help my son recover and in return, I grant her family aid. She, alongside the other human I put under contract, requested a way to stay in contact with their families. I'm here to give you that method. However, if you or your husband inform any sort of figure of authority, communications with your daughter will be cut off and you will only see her when the contract is complete. Inko waved her hand and a large mirror appeared on the wall. You may initiate the calls and move the mirror to another area in the house. My threat still stands. Tell any figure of authority and communications with your daughter will be cut off. Inko began to walk away. She opened the door before she looked back at Few. Oh, and one more thing. Check your debt. She closed the door behind her and walked out of the building. She got onto another train and sat down. She stared at the people around her with her eyes showing her their names and what they'd gambled on, most of it being money. After a few stops, she got off the train and walked towards a nice-looking house. It had 4 stories but couldn't be considered a mansion. Looking over it for a second, she nodded at it before walking towards the door. She looked around for a moment and once she was sure that no one could properly see her, she used the same rune and unlocked the door. Walking inside, she could faintly hear someone pacing about upstairs. She went towards the stairs and went to the 3rd floor where she was met with a man with engines coming out of his arms and looked like an older version of Tenya. Tensei? Tensei whipped around and the moment he saw the stranger powered up his engines and rocketed towards her. Inko lifted up her hand and with a simple magic circle, he was stopped in midair. I would like to keep things civil between us since I'm only here on behalf of your little brother. Tensei's eyes widened in rage. Tenya? I swear if you've hurt him I will dash. He is perfectly healthy and safe. I put him under contract with me to aid my son in his recovery, although given the fact you're a hero you already know who I am. You watched the footage while the Urarakas couldn't and were forced to lie to them. Inko smirked slightly. The heroes may not have considered it a gamble, but the laws of karma did. How do you know that? Tensei's eyes widened. I know the names of all gamblers and what they've gambled. Lying is one of the several types of gambling. Your brother requested me to ensure he could have some sort of communication with his family, much like Ochako. She didn't need to explain her ability to him, but she would prefer having some sort of trust. He was part of Tenya's family after all. Inko waved her hand and a mirror much like the one she summoned at the Uraraka apartment appeared. You can make calls with it to the one that Tenya has. However, if you or your family try to tell any authority figure about it, it will become a simple mirror and communications with your brother will be cut off. Inko let Tensei out of the grips of her spell and he fell to the ground with a grunt. As you already know from the footage, your family will experience great luck and a small boon to your fortune and reputation. Heed my warning and we shall have no issues. Inko walked out of the house and once more to the train station with the afternoon sun shining down on her. She stayed on the train for a couple of dozen stops before getting off. Walking towards a small house she was familiar with and had been invited to several times in the past, she used a little magic and saw that no one was home. Using the rune once again, she opened the door and stepped inside. She walked into the living room and with a wave of her hands the furniture within disappeared. In its place was a simple chair with a small table next to it with a decanter of whiskey and a glass resting on top of it. The blue flames from before washed over Inko with a small red tint to them and her true form was revealed, although she wasn't at her true height. Sitting down in the unlit room, she poured herself a glass of whiskey and placed the decanter back down. It refilled itself. She waited for a couple of hours before she heard jingling in the door that she had locked again, and with a quick wave of her free hand, the room became ever so slightly darker as the familiar voices of Mitsuki and Masaru Bakugo pierced her ears. I just don't understand what they mean. Inko threatening to kill Katsuki because he hurt Izuku? Mitsuki and Masaru had clearly just gotten back from UA. Killed, heart stopped beating, murdered. Those are far more accurate descriptors for what your son did to mine. The two jumped and looked upon the woman they'd known for years in her true form. Inko? Masaru stuttered out. Did you expect someone else? Inko arched an eyebrow. What did you mean by murdered? Mitsuki didn't remember being told anything about that. Inko gnashed her teeth, the fangs glinting in what little light she allowed scaring the couple. I mean, your little brat of a son used the gauntlets of his hero costume, which stored up his volatile sweat and ignited a full one directly upon my child. The injuries he sustained led to his heart stop beating and awakened his true demon form. The actions of your son caused mine to become an undead demon. Mitsuki took a step forward. Demon? Inko, what are you talking about? Right, you weren't shown the footage. Tell me, why do you think my eyes are glowing? Inko waved her hand and the room was bathed in light, revealing what she looked like to the Bakugo couple. They both reeled back in fear as she smiled at them with her pointed teeth and got up. Where once she had to look up to them while speaking with them, now the roles were reversed. While your son, for reasons that elude me, is guarded by an angel, neither of you are. Runes appeared in both of Inko's hands and before either Bakugo couple could even flinch their heads were held by them. While I could so easily kill you, that would be far too easy. The better path would be to take both of you as my servants till the end of time. Removing her hands from their heads, they fell to their feet bewildered. Upon their foreheads where their third eye would be was a rune. Well, what did you do to us? Masaru gripped his head in pain. Inko looked over them both. Both of you, lick one of my shoes. Against their minds, the bodies of either Bakugo fell to the ground and began to do as ordered. Cease and stand up. The order was followed. Those runes will make you obey me and anyone else that I allow to order you. They make you immortal and unkillable until I die. You can't raise a hand against anyone unless I allow you to. You are now mine. Inko's eyes gleamed dangerously as the couple quivered under their gaze. Inko brought out a phone and pressed a number. Stolas? I recommend you to come to the address I'm sending you so that we can return to hell. My business up here is done. Inko sat back in her chair after texting Stola's Bakugo's address. Masaru, stand over here and pour me another glass of whiskey. Mitsuki, get on the floor, I need a footrest. The two humans moved once more against their will. Inko propped her feet on Mitsuki's back while Masaru poured her a glass of whiskey. They would stay like that for an entire hour before Stola's would arrive. Mitsuki desperately wished her body would fail her and she'd fall to the floor, but it wouldn't. Stola's looked upon the sight in amusement. The last time you did something like this was when that mortal tried to take advantage of Lilith after summoning her. Whatever happened to him? Sent him to the ninth circle so the beasts could have an endless feast. The couple continued to quiver as Inko got up from her chair. With a wave of her hand, everything that she had summoned disappeared. Soon a red portal appeared over a pentagram on the floor. Inko ordered the two to enter with her and Stolas not far behind. As the portal closed, Masaru looked upon a throne. The carvings of it seemed to move and change. Stolas, we will meet with Lucifer later to discuss what you discovered. A car will be waiting for you outside. He could hear Inko talk to the man who had entered their house before they left. And Masaru? He looked over at his wife, who looked to where Inko's voice had come from. He had never heard her stutter before. Following her gaze, his eyes widened as he looked upon Inko, who easily towered over them. It was as though she were larger than life itself. The man now looked like an owl, and he now had a second pair of eyes. Inko looked at them for a moment before scoffing in disgust. Anderson! Her yell rattled their bones before the doors slammed open. Alexander stepped into the room and the two took notice of the cross around his neck. You asked for me, ma'am? I need to go finish up some work I was doing before leaving. I'll be sending Heinkel and Yumi to set up their room. So long as they aren't making out. Inko quickly left the room. Alexander looked at the couple for a moment before walking towards the door he had come through. Your job will entail basic maintenance of the facilities. There are some things you will learn and commit to memory while here. Inko is your superior and there are 4 heads of her personal council, with some of us having our own subordinates. He stopped before 4 paintings each depicting the 4 heads of her council. Alucard sat in a chair with various undead behind him. Integra sat in her own chair with a cigar in one hand and a sword in the other. Behind her were several hellhounds, and behind the hellhounds were a bunch of threads. Sarah's had her rifle leaning against her shoulder with all the imps that work within the casino behind her. Alexander stood with hands in prayer and 2 females behind him. One was dressed as a nun and wielded a katana, while the other wore a coat and had 2 pistols in hand. If we give you orders, you will follow them to the letter. If any of our subordinates give you orders, you will do the very same without question. At this time you are at the bottom of the barrel, but you can work through your station and may gain the respect of others that work here. You're a man of God, right? Mitsuki spoke up before Alexander could continue. Alexander's face remained neutral despite the interruption. Then why are you working for demons and devils? Mitsuki stepped forward and a tendril of thorns rushed past her and embedded itself into the wall behind her, leaving a small scratch on her cheek. It came from Alexander, who glared at her. I willingly stake my heart to try and stop Alucard, who at the time was my enemy. Any other Catholic who works under me once took orders from the man Maxwell, whose crimes condemned the entire Iscariot order and many Christians to hell. Inko gave me and the others a chance to continue our job and a new place to call home. She allows me, Heinkel, Yumiko, and any of the others who still believe to pray to God. She asks for little in return that we wouldn't already do as our own job. Masaru stepped in front of his wife. I'm sorry, it's just that everything has changed for us. Inko forced us to become her slaves and then immediately made us lick her shoes and then used Mitsuki as a footrest. Why would you defend her? The tendril of thorns retreated back inside Alexander. Because that was her putting on a show. While you may be her servants, the spell that forces you to listen to any of her orders is not permanent and can be removed if you prove your loyalty. The only reason she would do any of those things is that she knew cameras were there and recording what was happening. Alexander gripped his cross, trying to control his anger. Her target of revenge is your son. She will do whatever she deems necessary to fulfill, but she has her limits and refuses to kill an innocent. Father Anderson? They looked down the hallway to see the woman in a trench coat standing at attention, although her clothes were disheveled. Alexander calmed himself as he smiled. Heinkel, seems you and Yumi were having some fun. I assume their room is ready? Heinkel blushed slightly but nodded. We set it up next to mine. I can lead them to it if you would like? That would be lovely. Give Yumiko my regards. I need to go handle something. Alexander left and Heinkel gestured for the couple to follow her. Heinkel waited for Anderson to be out of sight before giving the couple the second fiercest glare they had seen that day, second only to Inko's. It would be best to remain mostly silent for the beginning of your stay here. We don't particularly like your son, and some are a hair trigger away from bringing all sorts of apocalypses to the mortal world. She began to walk away and the couple quickly fell into step behind her. Mitsuki wanted to ask for help, but after seeing what Anderson could potentially do, she decided on something different. How many afterlives are there? Too many to count. The most important for you is hell, which has the most souls, leading to extreme overpopulation. That's where we are if you have yet to find out. Heaven exists. Valhalla and the afterlives of other religions exist as well. God created some of them to give more freedom to humans, while others simply appeared, although most of them entered a ritual that fused them all with heaven, a choice the pantheons made, not God. The afterlives that are considered just like hell remain separated from all. Then there is purgatory. Heinkel's voice got low when she mentioned purgatory, almost as though it were cursed. What's wrong with purgatory? Masaru was hesitant to ask, but he'd prefer learning anything he could right now. It may be able to help them. That is where the Shinigami live. They use their death notes and send mortals to all of the afterlives before their times. Some have lost their death notes to the mortal world and humans have picked them up. It has always ended horribly, with the most recent one being a year after my death and was only resolved 2 years before the dawn of Quarks. Are you familiar with the killer known as Kira? Masaru gulped slightly. Most people are. It's believed that he may have had a quirk that allowed him to kill all the people that he did. Are you saying that he simply wrote those people down in a notebook? Yes, when death notes are involved, none of the pantheons are allowed to interfere. This is your room. They stopped in front of a door with twin skulls on it. There are some books in there that should catch you up on what you need to know, both for what jobs you will be doing and the history of hell and this casino. Heinkel went into the room next to theirs and closed the door. Mitsuki and Masaru looked at each other. We should go read those books. Yeah, need to know everything we can. Mortal World, UA High School. Nizu folded his paws together as he stared over the 3 teachers in front of him. Namuri had one of her arms in a cast and bandages for the rest. Aizawa had one of his eyes covered and a broken leg. Hizashi was the only one who wasn't injured too greatly and had on a quirk-negating bracelet until he could get a new directional speaker. Demons exist, we've known that since the dawn of Quarks. But we called villains that. None of us could have expected that one of our own students was a demon, or that his mother was as well. Nizu looked over the 3. All Might had immediately quit to begin the search for how to reach his successor. Nizu hadn't tried to stop him, especially once the man learned more about what happened after he had been punched out of the training city. Katsuki Bakugu will be under our protection until Inko Midoriya, if that is her real name, is no longer a threat to him. He will then be arrested for murder. Until then he will not be allowed to continue his studies in heroics. Furthermore, he will be on a 24-hour watch and is forbidden from leaving the school's premises. Nizu glared at Aizawa briefly before returning his attention to all 3. Out of the 3 of you, only 2 of you conducted yourselves properly in what was perceived to be a student losing control of their quirk. Aizawa, you will be on suspension pending an investigation into your teaching practices. Aizawa got to his feet and was about to say something, but Nizu beat him to it. You tried to use your knife on Izuku Midoriya, one of our students. From the footage, it was clear he was not in control, but you didn't have time to look at the footage. But your training as a hero should have told you that he was not in control. Yamada, you will be suspended for 1 week due to the damage Izuku Midoriya sustained from your attacks. However, your testimony and the footage showed that you didn't intend for him to be hurt, as he was only knocked out. Kayama, UA will compensate you for the money you lost from being unable to patrol and any sponsorships you will miss as you heal. If there is nothing else important you have to say, then you may go. Aizawa clearly wanted to object to his suspension, but Yamada pulled him away. Nizu let out a sigh. Demons, I'll need to find some books on the subject. And a Bible just in case. Nizu grabbed a drawer from his desk and opened it. A small pendant within glowed a brilliant blue. It's been a long time since I last talked with him. Should I call him? We don't yet know what we are dealing with, and having him come would mean trouble for me. Izuku lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. He had been staying inside his room for a few days now, ever since he learned the truth. Learning all that Charlie could remember about what his mother is truly like, he had requested a book on her in hopes of learning more. That, of course, was taking time. Is she the same person that I know? Is there a close enough resemblance? Or is she a complete stranger? Speaking out loud helped him somewhat to voice his fears, but he still didn't know how to face his mother. The woman who would help him when he had nightmares, would hug him when he cried in the days after his diagnosis, and yet still supported him in his dream of becoming a hero, aided him in his exercise and diet that All Might had assigned him, was the same woman who had killed tens of trillions and never regretted it, who had fought angels and the gods of other pantheons. Izuku was still trying to wrap his head around the fact that not only did heaven and hell exist, but so too did the other Pantheons and their respective afterlives with a smile on her face. Were they two sides of the same coin or two entirely different currencies? He raised his hand up to his face and looked at it. The blackened limb disturbed him, and if he didn't feel that it was his limb he would wonder if the owner was okay. He certainly wasn't. Getting up from the bed he looked in the mirror. The crown of horns upon his head made him feel sick. The wings and tail had become annoying all too quickly. The way his chest moved when he breathed was like watching a corpse breathe. Although I guess I am technically a corpse. All he knew was that he was a unique case. Previous undead demons didn't act like him even when his conscious mind hadn't woken up. They had feasted upon flesh, yet he never even tried to bite anyone. What the hell am I? Looking down at his legs he wanted to hurl. They could bend forward or back as he quickly learned, and he felt no pain. Why don't I feel any pain? I was blasted point-blank range in a hallway with an explosion of Bakugu's stored-up sweat. Izuku resisted the urge to gag at the memory, remembering the initial pain before everything went dark, yet when I woke up I didn't even feel any phantom pain. Not even from my old injuries. Izuku had done his best to analyze every part of his body and couldn't even find any of the scars Bakugu had given to him in the past. Am I the same person? A knock at the door stopped him from further spiraling. With a quick "it's open," Charlie came in with some food. She placed it next to another tray filled with untouched food. Izuku had refused to see Ida and Ochako since getting his initial answers. The pain of knowing that everything he knew in his life was a lie hurt too much, and seeing humans, the race he once thought he was part of, was too painful for him. You need to eat something. Charlie looked at him concerned. Izuku hadn't felt any sort of hunger since waking up, or the need to sleep. I'm not hungry. Just try, please. Charlie was getting desperate. In the 4 hell days that Izuku has been in the hotel, he hasn't left his room or taken a single bite. He hasn't even left the room. Please, leave me alone. Izuku returned to the bed and curled his wings around himself. Charlie looked at him and raised her hand, wanting to say something to try and comfort him, but she couldn't find the words. Her arm fell to her side and she dejectedly walked out of the room. With Inko. Please move the appointment back a bit, I have a meeting with Stolas and Lucifer I have to attend. Tell Saras to up the security and to work with Anderson to come up with a plan on how to deal with this Valentino. Alucard is to handle a couple of assassinations, the list of which I handed to you earlier. Integra is to handle wrapping up the deals she is striking with those annoying gangs and is then to report back here and handle further training Masaru and Mitsuki in their duties. Inko walked through the halls of her casino with an imp at her side writing everything down. There had been much she needed to clean up since her return and she had just begun to make progress. Please inform our guest that if she even touches alcohol she will be ejected from the premises immediately. Understood, ma'am, the limo is waiting for you outside. Anything to note before you leave? The imp had their pen at the ready. Once you have completed everything, give yourself a break and go eat. You have my permission to drink, but please do so in moderation. I'll be giving you a bonus at the end of the day for all the help you've given me. Inko smiled at the imp and quickly walked out the door and hopped into the limo. It quickly drove off toward Lucifer's castle, leaving the imp smiling wide at what Inko had just offered them. Looking out the window she admired the macabre beauty of hell. The way it has been built from the ground up and constantly evolving has always fascinated her. I hope Izuku will enjoy it at some point. I should be getting a report in a couple of days. I need to handle this Valentino soon so I can visit him without putting him in danger. Despite her immense power, she wasn't omnipotent. She couldn't predict what her enemies would do, but she could target the ones with the most power and remove them. The power vacuum he would leave behind would buy her more time to re-solidify the position she has left vacant for so long. He is in an alliance with 2 other overlords, we should consider removing them as well. If we don't, they'll most likely try and take revenge, which would put Izuku in danger. Lady Inko, there is a war currently happening within our path, so I'll need to take a detour. I do apologize for the delay. Inko looked at the chauffeur and waved her hand. It's no problem, we cannot predict how things may progress with all the power vacuums that appear after the extermination. It's why I decided to leave early. Just let me know if you'll need help with making a path and I'll give my aid. Thank you, Lady Inko. If the need arises I shall request it. Inko reached over and grabbed a bottle of whiskey and poured herself a glass. She nursed the drink as her thoughts returned to the matters at hand. Stolas said he placed a few observation spells around UA and on All Might. Should have given us something to start from by now. Answers to who the foolish angel is won't just reveal themselves right away, but they will in time. Taking another sip, she watched as the denizens of hell went about their day. It was oddly peaceful. Heaven itself has yet to respond to Lucifer's communications. Thankfully the other Pantheons have already sworn that they had nothing to do with the situation. Although I will still search for any rogue elements from them. Anyone who had a hand in shielding that brat and allowing harm to come to my baby will not be spared. I will make an example out of each of them and ensure no one will foolishly try this stunt again. Inko crushed the glass in her hand and the remaining whiskey went flying. Before it could land on anything it stopped. The glass quickly reformed and the liquid returned to it. Inko grabbed it with her other hand and stared down at the injured one. She had pushed a glass shard into her palm. Watching as the flesh mended itself, she let out a sigh and downed the rest of the whiskey. Nothing will stop me from righting this wrong. If I must storm heaven again to do so, then so be it. I wonder if Sukuna would be willing to help me. With Izuku. Izuku stared at the food. It was still warm and looked good. But he didn't feel any hunger. Sure, the food may look appetizing, but with no appetite, it's pointless to make it. Grabbing a simple boiled egg, Izuku was careful of his claws as he plopped it in his mouth. Chewing it slowly, a tear went down his cheek. I can't even taste it. There was no taste, no flavor, despite the fact it was clearly lightly seasoned with some salt and pepper. Yet he couldn't taste any of it. Swallowing it, Izuku sat there for a few moments before he flew to the trash can and promptly puked the egg up. He leaned over the trash can and panted before he dry heaved. Izuku fell back, and the only reason he wasn't laying flat on the ground was because of his tail. So, he panted slightly, trying to catch his breath. My body can't eat solid foods. Getting up, Izuku grabbed the glass of water and chugged it down. Putting the glass down, Izuku went to return to bed when his stomach turned and he found himself puking up the water into the trash can. Izuku found himself back to sitting on the floor in front of the trash can. He tried to stop the tears, to keep them at bay, but they came forth and he could do nothing but weep. His entire life was a lie. He had been murdered, transformed into a freak even among demons through some unknown means, and he couldn't even eat or drink. He wept for the life he could never return to. For the dream that was dead. The hope of being able to save people with a smile on his face. To be more than a worthless Deku. Congratulations, Bakugo, you finally did it. You killed my dream. Getting to his feet, and having the unfortunate experience of seeing his knees go from facing forward to backward as he stood up, Izuku went to the door. Gripping the handle, he just wanted to go back to bed and waste away. What was the point when you didn't have a dream anymore? But he still had some questions, and Ida and Ochako had to get back to their homes. Once that's done, I'll find someplace to end it. Opening the door, he walked out and towards the lobby. He kept his body hunched over and minded his tail, not wanting to fall down the stairs again, yet. Finding only the bartender, Izuku took a seat at the little bar. He crossed his arms on the top and rested his head upon them. You want anything to drink? I'm just gonna throw it up in seconds. Wouldn't even be able to taste it. Husk looked at Izuku for a moment as he took a sip of his cheap booze. It was a sight way too familiar for him. I'm sorry, kid. Why? I know what it's like to be murdered by someone you once trusted. Although from what I heard, that trust went away a long time ago for you. Surprising anyone who could hear the alcoholic demon, which he hoped was only the kid. Husk spoke with a soft voice. Would it be considered rude to ask? With most demons, yeah. Me? Alastor helped me get revenge, hence why I owed him a favor. So I'm over it for the most part. I lived in the States around what you guys apparently call the dawn of quirks. My daughter was born with a quirk and I was trying to keep her alive. Lost my wife in childbirth, never blamed my kid though. I killed a lot of people to protect her. Cheated in a bunch of poker games to make money. I was trying to get to this place my friend was, where he was apparently protecting people with quirks. I feel like I've heard of this before. You might have, kid. Turns out he was waiting for me to get there to bring in a couple soldiers with guns to kill a whole bunch of people who either had quirks or helped give birth to people with quirks. I gave my daughter to a lady I'd grown close to alongside my journal and our family tree, the one thing I had left from my home aside from my wedding ring. Then I held them all off, even managed to kill some of them before they got me. When I got here I was desperate enough to go back and kill the rest of them to protect that group as much as I could. So I struck a deal with Alastor and I already told you the rest. Stories like that were common throughout the dawn of quirks. It has at times been called the Second Holocaust. Izuku shivered from the books he'd read about that time. The horrors. Husk shook his head. Fuck me. Look, kid, after that, I was still a mess. I would never get to see my daughter grow up. So I quickly became an alcoholic and gambling addict. Still have them, but it's more I've just become numb to it all and they're just habits. Husk chuckled and took a swig. You want to wallow about it all, fine then. You'll just be another demon who does the same in hell. Or are you gonna do something? Anything? You've got a second chance to make new choices for things that weren't open to you before. Get some new experiences, kid, and you might just feel better. Izuku chuckled weakly. Thanks. I'm just realizing I never asked for your name. It's Husk, kid. Izuku was about to say something when a flaming pentagram appeared behind him and sucked him in. Husk spit out his booze and looked in horror at where the kid had been moments before. Everybody, we got a problem. With Inko. Getting out of the limo, Inko stopped for a moment as she felt a familiar pull that she ignored. Stepping towards the gates and growing to her true size, she stepped into the castle and made her way toward the meeting hall. Ma'am, would you like anything to be served to you while you are meeting with Lord Morningstar and Lord Goetia? A servant imp asked her. Some wine would be nice. I'll go find a bottle for you. The servant scurried away. Inko found herself before the doors to the meeting hall and pushed them open. Lucifer was already there, but Stolas had yet to arrive. Early as ever, Inko. Lucifer grinned at her as she took her seat. When meeting with family over important matters such as these, it pays to be early. Especially so soon after an extermination. I should let you know I have plans to kill the Overlord Valentino, so do be ready for some extra chaos. Not surprising. Any troubles getting used to your true body? Inko groaned. Just that I can feel when humans do some sort of summoning ritual for a member of our family. So annoying. Lucifer chuckled. Agreed, can be jarring at times. Lilith is currently working to get communications open with heaven, so she won't be joining us, but she sends her love. I almost pity those fools for ignoring her. On Earth. Satan. We return your filthy creatures back to the pits of hell. A blonde woman with bandages on her head threw a torch onto a pyre with 2 demons tied to it. May the root of evil remain honored as we continue thy work. The flames quickly grew and encompassed both of the demons, but it did nothing to them, not even burning their clothes. Yes, sorry, but your fire doesn't really work on us. The taller of the two spoke, clearly done with the bullshit of the day. Oh. Well, how about I just dash? Before the woman could finish, the fire changed. It grew higher and became as black as pitch. Growls could be heard coming from it as the 2 demons started trying to desperately free themselves. Shit, Blitz, what the fuck is happening? I don't know, Millie. Satan? The woman looked up in wonder. Her husband was right behind her and looked at it in fear. A long blackened limb came out from the fire and grabbed Blitzo's face and used him to pull itself out. His eyes widened and he began to hyperventilate as a towering creature burst forth. Large wings stretched out and its tail flicked about. Rising to its full height showed the crown of horns connected to its head. It looked around for a moment, clearly getting its bearings, before settling upon the blonde woman. She quickly kneeled before him. Satan, our Lord and Master. Forgive us for summoning you from your most evil of work. A small imp was hiding among the trees with a gun at the ready. That's not Lucifer. Who is that? The creature's glowing green eyes bore into her very soul as it stepped forward. A growl burst forth from its lips. In a burst of speed that forced the fire out from the resulting winds, it grabbed the woman and forced her to look into its eyes. She tried to scream, but as she opened her mouth, a stream of green liquid came out and went into the creature's mouth. As it went into the creature, the woman's body began to wither. The moisture went first, leaving her wrinkled as her hair began to fall out. Her eyes shrunk into her head as her limbs began to shrink. Soon her clothes and bandages fell to the ground. As the creature finished its feast, its skin began to change. It became lighter, becoming a very dark green. The husband ran back to the house in the distance, tripping over himself as he did so and attracting the creature's attention. Letting out a roar, it ran after him, leaving the imp to go help Millie and Blitzo. Sir, we need to leave right now. Yeah, no shit, Moxie, what the fuck was that? The screams of the children could be heard from the house, catching Moxie's attention. Blitzo quickly pulled out his phone and called someone. Luna, we need a portal back right fucking now. Then one of the screams was cut off, the other got louder though. Mox, do you have any idea what that is? Millie looked at her husband, hoping he knew what they were dealing with. The last member of the Twisted family was silenced. Moxie noticed that the husk of the woman had turned to dust before he heard the wails of someone crying. It was like he had been shot, they were so loud. Blitzo and Millie both looked towards the house as well, watching as the creature tore it apart. Moxie put the rifle up and looked through the scope. What he saw stopped his heart. The creature's body was convulsing, its veins glowing. The blackened flesh became lighter. It was still green, but it was far more noticeable in the light of the night. The wings upon its back flapped wildly as they grew to 3 times their length before beginning to split apart into a new set of wings. The screams only got worse. Despite his job as an assassin, Moxie did still care about people. And he couldn't ignore those screams of pain. A crack could be heard in the distance as something flew through the air. Blitzo entered the room just in time to see Charlie slam into the wall of the building and land in the room with her wings and horns out for all to see. Where is he? They stared at her in terror as she looked around before her eyes landed on Izuku. Despite his changed form, she could still recognize him. Izuku, are you okay? Are you hurt? Shit, I should have warned you about those stupid rituals. She quickly tucked in her wings and horns and was at his side in a second, checking over every part of his body. Seeing the changes to him, she turned around and glared at the assembled demons with burning eyes. What did you do to him? Blitzo immediately pointed at Moxie and yelled, "He did it," before bolting out of the room, not wanting to deal with a pissed-off princess of hell. Charlie stared Moxie down as her horns grew out again as well as her wings. Moxie cowered away but knew he couldn't run. You see, we were on a job up on Earth to kill this woman who slept with our client's husband when she was alive. Bit of a story there." Moxie pointed to Mayberry, who tried to hide behind Luna to escape Charlie's glare. "Turns out though that she and her entire family were cannibals and worshipped your father. They, tried to burn Millie and my boss, the one who just ran out of the room, and accidentally summoned him." Charlie picked Moxie up by the collar and forced him to look directly into her eyes as she stared into his. "What changed him?" Moxie gulped loudly. He grabbed the target, and this weird green thing came out of her and went into him. It changed him slightly. He then went after the husband and their psychopathic children. His eyes stopped glowing after dash. His eyes were glowing? Charlie asked, her voice no longer echoing. Yes? Charlie took a deep breath and dropped Moxie. "It seems something has been discovered here. Now I am gonna tell you this once. Say anything of this to anyone, and you will face my father. And trust me when I say that is the more merciful option." Blitzo peeked out from the door. What would be the not merciful option? You would have to deal with his mother. Charlie quickly turned around and grabbed Izuku. Pulling him to his feet, she hugged him tight. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted him to stop." His words puzzled the others. "It's okay, I guess now is as good a time as any to teach you how to fly. With Inko. So I'm trying to get some information on how quirks may affect a human's mental state when this asshole comes up to me and starts talking about how I'm carrying the next generation of the quirk race. I think his name was Destro or something. Anyway, pisses me off enough I fuck with his karma, and so he gets to build up this entire movement and then it crumbles all before him in a matter of days. That was nice." Lucifer let out a laugh at Inko's story. Her arriving a couple of hours early allowed them to properly catch up. Stolas soon after walked into the room and took his seat. "With Stolas here, we may now begin this meeting." Lucifer quickly grew serious. "Stolas, what did you find?" "Well, the first thing that proved most interesting was that one of my observation spells on the principal showed that the angel's manipulations don't affect him. It may be possible to use him as a way to get the brat. Second, however, was that Toshinori Yagi was trying to find a way to summon you, Inko." Stolas crossed his legs and smirked slightly. Inko raised her eyebrow. "Pardon?" "Indeed. He was scouring through multiple books and websites trying to figure out how to summon you. He obviously doesn't know of your relation to Lucy or Lily, but he may try those avenues in an attempt to reach you." "Why would he be trying to summon me?" It truly puzzled Inko. "From what I could gather, he seems to have a close relationship with your son. I'd almost say like a father." That stalled her. When Izuku had begun dieting and exercising, she hadn't looked too deep into it, working more on trying to protect him from Aldera at the time. But what had started him on that path? Could it have been Toshinori Yagi? "If you could set up a more personalized ritual for him to find so I don't mix it up with the other rituals we deal with on the daily, we should be able to open communications with him then." "I'll see what I can do." Lucifer cleared his throat. "While Heaven has yet to respond to our communications, we have heard word from the other pantheons that they were not involved. This of course doesn't eliminate rogue elements, so we will still investigate just to be safe. And hopefully, we will discover a way to reverse the damages done to Izuku, although our doctors have not yet discovered anything. Stolas, please loop both Inko and I with the observation spells so we can keep watch ourselves. With your own responsibilities, we can't rely on you to tell us what is going on." "Understood." With the final word, the meeting was over. Inko now had another one to handle back at her casino. With Izuku. You got this, you're doing great, Izuku. Charlie cheered her cousin on as he struggled to fly alongside her back to the hotel. They were close to the roof and Izuku was actually showing exhaustion. Once they were over the roof, he stopped flapping his wings and flopped onto the building. He panted while looking up at the giant pentagram in the sky before something hit him and he let out a laugh. What's so funny? Izuku looked to his cousin. I'm feeling tired, hungry, and thirsty. When I was forced away, I hadn't felt any of those things. Now, I feel more alive. He let out a joyous laugh and hugged Charlie. It shocked her, but she quickly returned it. Thank you for teaching me. He smiled at her before heading inside. Charlie looked at the door with a smile before quickly fishing out her phone and dialing a number that, to be honest, she doesn't even know if still works. Holding it to her ear, she let it ring before it was thankfully picked up. Hey, Octavia. I need your help with something. It's about Auntie Inko's son. Do you know what it means for a demon to absorb some green essence from a person? She listened to a question on the other side. Yes, the human is a sinner. Some more talking and her eyes widened. So that's what he needs? Octavia, I need you to do something. I ran into these imps who are able to go up to Earth and kill people. I didn't stop to ask their names, but I think their boss was named Blitz. Some loud noises could be heard on the other end. Oh, I don't know, I was more focused on Izuku. Yes, that's his name. Look, these imps are currently our safest bet on helping Izuku recover. Help me hire them for this, and I'll do whatever you want. More was spoken and Charlie nodded. Yeah, that can work. Thank you, it was nice talking to you again. She hung up and let out a sigh. He needs the souls of sinners to heal. The best I can do is guide him towards people who sin for pleasure. With Inko. Inko got out of her limo and walked into her casino. Sarah's quickly fell into step beside her. Ma'am, Anderson and I have scouted out Valentino and found multiple weaknesses we could exploit. Excellent job. Did you investigate those two other overlords he is allied with? Heinkel and Yumiko were assigned that job. Good. I'm assuming our guest is waiting for me in my office? Sarah's nodded her head. Yes, ma'am. She hasn't touched a drop of alcohol and has been on her best behavior. Perhaps there is hope. Return to your duty, Sarah's. I will call upon you later once we know more about Valentino's allies. Inko headed to her office while Sarah's went to do her rounds. Entering her office, she was met with a pink-skinned succubus who jerked in her chair and looked up at Inko with wide eyes. Verasika, good to see you. Am. It is a pleasure to see you again after so long. Her voice cracked slightly. What do you ask of me? Verasika was desperate to get this job back. It had been the best, and safest, she had ever had. You will attend rehab every day, miss rehab one day, you don't get that day's pay. You will not touch a drop of alcohol while working for us. The mess you caused last time was a disaster. Verasika flinched at the reminder. Finally, your ex-boyfriend. You are not to interact with him unless you absolutely do not have a choice in the matter. I will not have you relapse because of him, although he is apparently going through his own problems. Am I understood? Verasika nodded rapidly. Thank you, ma'am. Inko nodded at her and she got up to leave. However, she stopped at the door for a moment. Ma'am, may I ask something? Inko raised her brow but gestured for her to go on. The baby, did you have them? Inko's eyes glowed dangerously and Verasika feared she overstepped. Yes, he is the light of my life. Although a situation recently occurred, you may ask Sarah's about it while you figure out your schedule for performances. Verasika nodded fearfully and quickly left the room. Ida carried some dishes into the kitchen to be cleaned. While they were technically guests of the hotel, he didn't feel right staying for free, so he picked up some chores. Uraraka was in the kitchen as well, cleaning what little dishes there were. I'm surprised there aren't more tenants. Ida shared his thoughts. It is a relatively new thing, by Helltime at least. Plus, they have yet to have proof that redemption works, they don't want to get their hopes up. Uraraka spoke dispassionately. Despite the short amount of time she had known Izuku, she had enjoyed his company. Any word on where he is? After Husk had told them what happened, Charlie had zipped off to her room, saying something about rituals. None. Have your parents contacted you yet? Ida's parents had yet to contact him either. Not yet. I think it might be because of the time difference, and how they got the mirrors. Uraraka shivered at the memory of Inko at her full height. Despite seeing the woman cry at the state of her son, she was still absolutely terrifying. Especially with what they learned she has done in her life. I suppose. Ida sighed. While the way he met Izuku hadn't been the greatest, he felt that once they started to talk they became good friends. Now though, after learning parts of Izuku's past, he wasn't certain if he felt like that. Do you think Izuku sees us as friends? When he first woke up he talked as though he thought of us as friends, but now? After learning everything? I don't know. Uraraka sighed. He just learned he isn't human, that he's never been human. That would certainly affect how I look at everything. She put the dish in her hand down and turned to look at Ida. His life has been one of pain, and then you put on the fact that he died, which he remembers all of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't want to talk to us. Ida looked down. We'd remind him too much of the life he lived. You heard what Miss Inko said, the amount of suffering he has endured. Inko had called them over one of their mirrors to talk more on how they could help Izuku, as well as share more about Izuku's past to have them better understand some of his reactions. If it was me I would have gone insane. Same. Ida agreed with her. So how do we help him once Charlie finds him? Fuck if I know. He would block the door whenever we tried to bring him food, and even when Charlie started to bring him food he wouldn't eat any of it, none of it was even fucking touched. Is he starving himself, or is there something going on that causes him to not be hungry? What about sleep? Charlie says he's usually just in bed, but he's always awake whenever she brings him food, and she doesn't even have a schedule with that, so how is he always awake whenever she comes? We don't know anything because he doesn't want help. Uraraka panted slightly as she came down from her tangent. Ida shared her worries. We do what we can. Charlie at least is seemingly starting to trust us, so we can work with her to help Izuku. We just dash. Suddenly the doors to the kitchen opened and Izuku walked in, although his appearance had changed. He no longer looked like a breathing dehydrated corpse and had some actual color to him. He also now had 2 pairs of wings instead of just one. The thing that caught their attention though was that he had a small smile and was humming. Okay, let's see what is in the fridge. Oh, I hope I can make katsudon. Izuku opened the fridge, not noticing his 2 friends were in the kitchen. Not a lot, but I've worked with less in the past. Looks like I'm making ramen today. Izuku stood back up with several ingredients in hand. He pushed the fridge door closed with his hip and went over to the stove to begin boiling the noodles. I'm lucky they had some noodles. De Gifuku? Uraraka found her voice. Izuku jumped in surprise, thankfully not dropping anything, and turned around to see his 2 friends. His eyes widened and he was trying to figure out what to say to them. Do you guys want some ramen? His brain decided to not be helpful today. Uraraka and Ida shared a look. Yeah, I could go for some. Uraraka said, let me go get some of my favorites. She went to go grab her favorite additions and seasonings. Ida? Izuku was hesitant to ask. Ida took a deep breath. Fuck it, Uraraka, move over, I want some beef with mine. He gave a smile to his friend, just happy Izuku was willing to talk with them. While we eat, could you explain what the hell doesn't really work, what in the name of the gods happened? And why you suddenly have a new pair of wings? Izuku chuckled a bit. I don't really remember most of it, but I met this nice imp who helped me out. Izuku smiled, happy that his friend still wanted to be his friend still. Angel Dust could do nothing but stare at Izuku cooking. While whatever he was making smelled delicious, it was more what he was wearing that got to him. Angel? Izuku called for him. Here's my risotto. Izuku put a plate of risotto before him. It looked incredibly creamy with some extra cheese grated on top, and he could faintly smell some wine from it. It's risotto alla Milanese. I've been meaning to try and make it for a while now, and Nifty was kind enough to get the ingredients for me, alongside quite a few more. Izuku began to hum to himself as he went back to cooking. Charlie walked into the kitchen as Angel took his first bite. She had to stop when she saw the changes to the hotel's kitchen, as well as the little squeak that Angel let out. Just like Mama used to make, he murmured to himself. Charlie looked at how much bigger the kitchen had become, with several stoves and even a brick oven in the corner, which Izuku was getting something out of. What the dash? Thanks for trying my food, Angel. Izuku unknowingly cut her off. While trying my own food to see if I got it right would be easier, it's nicer to share the experience of making something new with someone else. Izuku brought out a pizza and put it on a platter. Granted, this isn't the first time I've made a pizza, but it is the first time I've made a pizza margherita. Man, I remember when Mom first took me to that pizza-making class, I had wished we could have a pizza oven for months after it was over. Izuku chuckled to himself at the memory, but there was a sad look in his eyes as well. Here you go. Izuku grabbed the pizza cutter and cut the pizza once he set it up in front of Angel. When did this happen? Vaggie had followed after Charlie when she noticed her girlfriend was taking a while in the kitchen. Alastair did it a couple hours ago, Angel murmured to her as he grabbed a slice of pizza and dug in, the plate of risotto gone. Izuku's been cooking since. Vaggie raised an eyebrow, and you've just been sitting there flirting with him? Nope, Angel pointed over to a small pile of dishes, spaghetti alla carbonara, gnocchi, pesto alla genovese, lasagna, a prosciutto di Parma sandwich, ribollita, bagna cotta, and polenta. It's just been you eating? Charlie was surprised. Angel cared a lot about his figure. Nifty and Husk were here earlier. And I just can't stop. Angel felt his eyes tearing up. It's been so long since I had food like this, since I enjoyed some proper Italian food, and every time I take a bite I just feel so happy. Angel began to devour the rest of the pizza. Oh, Vaggie, Charlie. When did you guys get here? Izuku waved to them as he placed a bowl in front of Angel. The chocolate gelato is ready, Angel. Izuku smiled at Angel. Thanks again for being my taste tester. I haven't exactly had a chance recently to try new recipes, so this was really fun. Once again all Angel could see was Izuku's outfit. Yeah, no problem, he mumbled as he grabbed the spoon. You guys want anything? Izuku asked Charlie and Vaggie. You got any coffee? Charlie took a seat next to Angel, who immediately used two of his arms to guard his gelato, and Vaggie sat next to her. Mom didn't like having coffee, but it certainly helped me get up in the morning. Charlie noticed once more how there was a tinge of sadness in Izuku's voice at the mention of his mother. I usually have it black. Izuku quickly ground up some coffee beans and put them in 2 glass bowls with a paper separating the grounds from the glass, but I do know a couple recipes I'd use for some special occasions. He put the bowls over 2 coffee pots. Oh shoot, Izuku smacked the side of his head. You guys want anything special or something basic? Just some cream and sugar for me, Vaggie told him. Charlie thought for a moment. You know how to make a frappuccino? Izuku filled 2 kettles with water and placed them on a stovetop to heat up. I do. He grabbed the sugar bowl and pointed at the fridge. The creams are in the fridge over there. I don't know what flavors you'd like though, so I figure it'd be best if you chose, he said to Vaggie. Vaggie got out of her seat to select the creams but stopped when she saw what Izuku was wearing. That explains way more, she muttered to herself. Al casino. Inko looked out over the city from her bedroom tower. With heaven still not communicating with hell, she was losing any semblance of patience that she had remaining. She wanted the angel who protected Katsuki, and she wanted them now. What are they doing up there? She wondered aloud. Maybe Beelzebub could help. I haven't been able to meet with him since coming back, she sighed, tired of heaven refusing to cooperate and not being able to further help her son. With a flick of her wrist, her clothes changed to more casual wear and she went off into the tower in search of the kitchen. Hopefully the renovations I requested are done. Mitsuki and Masaru had been waiting outside her doors and immediately followed after her. They hadn't yet been given any official assignments for the day, and until that happened they were ordered to follow Inko around and attend to her needs. Do you need anything? Masaru asked, hoping it wasn't anything bad. I'm just going to the kitchen. Notify anyone who has requested a meeting with me that I will be there, Inko ordered them, and Mitsuki immediately took out the phone she had been given to do so. Mitsuki was dressed like a regular maid, although she was extremely thankful it wasn't overly sexualized and covered everything, the skirt even going down to her knees. Masaru was dressed like a butler. He had also been given a pocket watch to keep track of time. So far nothing bad had happened to them since their enslavement beyond some dirty looks from the employees of the casino, and the jobs they had been given didn't put them in any danger. Sir Integra wishes to speak with you, she said. It relates to Izuku. Mitsuki relayed the message to Inko. Inko stopped in her tracks and the couple almost crashed into her. Did I give you permission to say his name? Mitsuki squeaked, a habit that she had quickly picked up since coming here, much like Masaru and him gulping when scared. Unless I tell you otherwise. Inko turned her head to stare at them. You will refer to him as my son, you failure of a mother. Mitsuki could do nothing but nod, words failing her. Inko was nothing but cold to them. She hated them with every fiber of her being. While most would attribute the failure of the parents to the guardian angel of Katsuki Bakugo, when one actually knows how a guardian angel works, the story becomes different. The angel can only change the scales of karma that inhabit the one it watches over, tilting it so that the one it protects has so much good luck it becomes next to impossible for them to have bad luck. However, it cannot affect the karma or choices of others. The guardian angel also cannot influence the choices of the one it watches over or others, the perception of the one they look over, and they are strictly forbidden from influencing the environment. It was clear that the guardian angel of Katsuki Bakugo had influenced the environment in the past. Inko had checked herself when she noticed discrepancies in appearance that contradicted her memory. to the point she had set up a spell to follow Katsuki Bakugo's path throughout his days to document changes in the environment, hoping to catch a mistake that would lead her to the angel, with no luck. She had handed over everything recorded to Integra to investigate. But Mitsuki and Masaru chose to ignore the obvious signs of their son displaying psychopathic tendencies, despite seeing multiple examples of it from the various villains seen on the news that she knew they watched. They chose to simply think it was boys just being boys when it should have been clear to anyone that Katsuki was tormenting several children, ruling his classroom with fear while his teachers turned the other cheek and ignored it in favor of having one of their students go to UA. The signs were all there in plain view. Katsuki never once tried to hide them. And yet they did nothing. If they had at least tried to do anything, they wouldn't be here. Inko thought to herself, a cascade of why she hated the two of them so much falling through her thoughts. I won't give you another warning, so don't make the same mistake. She continued walking to the kitchen, Mitsuki and Masaru stalling behind for a few moments to steady their heartbeats. Hazbin Hotel. Izuku hummed as he blended everything up for Charlie's frappuccino. How's the coffee, Vaggie? Vaggie was pouring herself a new cup as she answered, it's great. She smiled at him. You know we don't have an official chef at the hotel. Izuku saw what she was getting at. It's something to do. What about Ida and Uraraka? What about us? Tenya asked as the two humans mentioned entered the kitchen. Vaggie asked if I could be the hotel's cook while I stay here, Izuku said as he waved at his friends. He finished blending up Charlie's frappuccino and put it in a large cup before adding whipped cream, caramel and chocolate drizzle on top, and some sprinkles. Here you go. Charlie took the drink eagerly and immediately took a taste. Oh, that hits the spot, she smiled happily. You guys want anything? Izuku grabbed Angel's empty bowl and put it in the sink. I could eat, Ochako said, taking her own seat. So long as we aren't intruding on anything. Tenya took his own seat. I know something that should be good. Izuku grabbed 2 pans and went to grab the necessary ingredients for what he had in mind. I didn't realize you liked cooking so much, although given your reaction to meeting Lunch Rush it should have been obvious, Ochako giggled. You were acting like you just met All Might. No, I was acting exactly like I was when I met All Might, Izuku muttered out loud, not really registering what he said as he began to crack some eggs. Tenya tilted his head. What do you mean? You met All Might with the rest of 1A on the first day of our second week at UA. You weren't acting surprised at all when you saw him. That's because he was my trainer. He helped me exercise and get the proper muscle mass so I'd be ready for the entrance exam. Where did Nifty put the day-old rice? Izuku started opening some cabinets. Ochako couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. All Might personally trained you? Yup, even set me up on a diet. Learned some fun recipes for that. Honestly, meeting him was the best day of my life, although it certainly was pretty bad to start it off. There it is, Izuku found his day-old rice. How did you even meet him? Tenya leaned forward, curious. It made sense in hindsight given All Might's reaction to Izuku's death, even if Tenya didn't know what exactly was going on at the time. This sludge villain tried to suffocate me and take over my body, almost blacked out. Izuku started to make some scrambled eggs. He put the villain in a bottle and jumped away after I woke up and knew I was okay, and I being an idiot grabbed on. Izuku chuckled fondly. He almost kicked me off before realizing the fall would kill me. He was so shocked I did that. Izuku began to fry the rice. Why would you do that? Ochako had never heard of a hero fan doing something as dangerous as jumping onto a hero. Charlie was watching the whole conversation unfold with Vaggie. Angel had left to go exercise. Izuku sighed almost fondly as he began to fry the scrambled eggs. I wanted to ask him a question. If a quirkless person could become a hero like him. That only served to further confuse Ochako. Why would you want to ask him that? I didn't have a quirk at the time, Izuku said plainly as he began to split the fried rice and scrambled eggs into 4 bowls to mix together. I first used it at the entrance exam to save you. Ochako quickly connected the dots, Tenya doing the same. Do you think it's from your demon heritage? Nope, Izuku responded right away. I know it's a quirk. My heritage hadn't even awakened until I died. Murdered? Tenya interrupted. You were murdered. Izuku hummed. Yeah. Wanna hear something stupid? When no one said anything, Izuku took that as a cue to continue. I started learning how to cook when I was around 8 to 9, and it was because I wanted to be better at something than Bakugo. Izuku cracked some more eggs into 2 new pans and mixed in the fried rice and scrambled eggs into them once they began to cook. He was good at everything without even trying, from taking 1 class of drums and being a master at it all of a sudden, to being the first to read and knowing different ways to understand kanji, to just about everything. He'd tried it once and he was the best at it, but he had never tried cooking. I asked Mom if I could take some classes and she signed me up. Izuku chuckled a bit. My first few attempts were pretty badly burnt. Sure, they were still edible, but the taste was ruined. Took me a while, but eventually, I got the hang of it. I started doing it more and more, cooking me and Mom dinner, made us breakfast sometimes, even dessert a few times. It was fun for me, and eventually, I didn't even care about being better than Bakugo at that one thing. I had just found something for myself that I could enjoy where even if you had a quirk it didn't affect how well you did. Izuku was smiling. I even found my favorite food thanks to it. The 4 people listening to Izuku were surprised. You know, Izuku started up again. On the day I met All Might, Bakugo had told me to take a swan dive off the roof of a building and hope for a quirk in the next life. He what? Ochako yelled. Tenya was struck speechless while Charlie had this dark look in her eyes that was scaring Vaggie. Izuku's next words brought everyone's thoughts to a screeching halt, and fuck me, I actually considered doing it. Izuku sighed as he began to fold the eggs. I was at a pretty low point and that day hadn't helped one bit. The teacher had revealed I wanted to try and get into UA to my whole class and everyone immediately ridiculed me for it. Bakugo of course destroyed my notebook again and burnt my uniform for the 3rd time that month. Things like that stack up when it's done to you over the years. Izuku finished making the omuris and put them on 2 plates before putting them in front of his friends. He smiled brightly at them. Hope you guys enjoy. The scariest part for them was that he wasn't faking being happy. He was just remembering years of torment at Bakugo's hands and was clearly sad, yet like a switch was flipped he was smiling wider than a rainbow and meant it. Thanks. Ochako and Tenya said at the same time. Before they could take a bite they noticed what Izuku was wearing and their brain stalled. Izuku was wearing a skirt, with his tail coiled around his waist, and it reached to the middle of his thighs. And he looked damn good in it. Oh fuck, he's hot. They both shared the same thought. Al Casino. Why does it feel like someone is thinking something lewd about Izuku? Inko suddenly got a weird feeling but shook it off as she noticed the eggs she was making were on fire. What did I do wrong this time? I greased the pan, put an egg in and started frying it, then I turned for a second and this happens. She scratched her head in confusion. Izuku said this is one of the simpler dishes to make. Ma'am? Integra called out into the giant personal kitchen. Over here, Inko called out as she dumped the ruined eggs. What did you want to talk about? Integra opened her mouth to say something but then something else hit her. What is that smell? Inko chuckled awkwardly. That would be the 12 attempts I had at frying an egg. Integra blinked for a moment, caught off guard. You're cooking without magic? Izuku loves to cook. I never really tried it myself while in the mortal world, but the way his eyes would light up as he made something, the single-minded focus he got, he couldn't be happier. After everything that's happened, Inko gripped the cloth over her heart. It feels like I haven't done enough with him, I haven't done more together with him. Tenya Ida called me yesterday. Izuku has gotten healthier. Integra perked up at the news. He doesn't look like a corpse anymore, was Ochako Uraraka's words. He apparently made ramen for them. He was smiling. I want to get this matter with Katsuki Bakugo's guardian angel over with soon. So what is your news regarding him? Integra sat down in one of the chairs and lit a cigar. It's not good news, that much I can tell you. When it was mentioned that Katsuki Bakugo had the ability to create explosions, I was reminded of a similar case some time again, Yashikage Kira. Inko tilted her head as she remembered. One of the serial killer stand users, correct? He was the one who plagued Morio with multiple murders, starting with Raimi Sugimoto, and upon gaining his stand, Killer Queen killed close to 100 people. Things only took a turn for the worse for him once the Joestars got involved. Even then he managed to kill about 6 people if I'm remembering correctly, and Killer Queen even gained a time loop ability before he was defeated. But why is that important? Due to the evidence you collected upon noticing that Katsuki Bakugo had a guardian angel, I began looking through the guardian angel registry for any who matched the patterns shown. But none of them matched until I began to look through the registry of fallen angels. The pattern matched one angel who never went through the ritual of falling from heaven. Ma'am, I believe we are dealing with the guardian angel of monsters. For a moment it was as though nothing else existed but those words. These accursed words. Words Inko did not, even for a second, believe were true. How can you be certain? Gone was any emotion in her voice. Integra knew this would be Inko's reaction. The first thing that began my suspicions was Katsuki Bakugo himself. The behavioral patterns fit with the others that the guardian angel of monsters has watched over. But his actions were what gave my suspicions more reason to investigate. Using his quirk illegally, hurting other students, even in front of teachers who for some reason never once stopped what he was doing, destroying the property of his school and other students, then of course most recently the murder of Izuku. There are other things we may not be aware of since you mainly observed him during school hours. Inko had set that spell up to last from the beginning of the school day to the end. It was easier to manage and Izuku always got out of there as fast as he could. At least one of these matches up with the others that GAM has watched over. It could simply be a copycat, a rogue angel who thinks the GAM is right. Inko denied it all. She refused to see this as a possibility. It is merely suspicion, ma'am. I requested this meeting so I may have permission to look into the GAM case files further than what my clearance grants me. Integra bowed her head. Inko took a deep breath. Do you what will happen if the GAM is considered just a suspect alone in our investigation? We were assured by the chief deities in the Council of Valhalla that the GAM had been captured and was scheduled for execution. I remember when they informed us. It was a half-century before you had to go to observe the suddenly appearing quirks. Either they lied to us, or whoever was executed was a decoy so the real GAM could go into hiding for a time. Those are two potential scenarios we are facing if your suspicions have merit. Inko tapped her fingers for a few seconds, trying to steady her nerves. Inko had been assigned to investigate the guardian angel of monsters by Lucifer. The kinds of monsters they found had been watched over by the GAM had shown an angel who was aiming to create chaos, with what goal in mind was never truly learned. As the name implied, the GAM brought incredible luck to people who were truly monsters, prolonging when they would face their karmic punishment until their negative karma had built up to the point that once it was unleashed the individual being watched over by the GAM would die. And by then many people, innocent and sinners alike, were already dead. I give you permission to look through the case files of the guardian angel of monsters. I recommend also looking through the files for the Joestar family, Muzan Kibutsuji, and Alucard's early days before he found his wife Lisa. In fact, you can also look through the Belmont archives just to be safe. The various killers who earned the title of Jack the Ripper, Kars the Pillarman, Muzan Kibutsuji, and some of his 12 Kazuki, Yashikage Kira, Alucard during his more bloodthirsty days, that one spirit calling himself Death, Enrico Pucci, Adolf Hitler, and countless others. It goes almost all the way to Cain, although we confirmed the GAM had nothing to do with that incident or Adam and Eve being kicked out of Eden. Is the Council of Valhalla gathering soon? Integra checked her phone. In 3 months' time, that's by the mortal world's time. If I'm allowed a few assistants, I'll be done within 2 months' mortal time. You may use Mitsuki and Masaru. You may grab any others that you require to finish this so long as their station is below you and their jobs aren't too important. Is your business with those nearby gangs finished? Inko wanted all of Integra's focus on investigating this. They decided to get greedy in what they wanted in return for stepping away from attacking the casino. Integra unsheathed her rapier slightly and holy light shined from the blade, so I gave them a second offer they couldn't refuse. All of my attention will be on this investigation. Inko let out a sigh. Good. If you need to work with someone from heaven, it would be easier to contact the Valkyrie Brunhild. Big Sister Lilith hasn't had any luck getting in contact with heaven directly, and if your suspicions turn out to be true, we may have an explanation as to why. Hazbin Hotel. Tenya Ida was having a crisis. They were currently in the lounge of the hotel and Izuku was still wearing the skirt. It showed off plenty of his surprisingly muscular legs. Were they always that muscular? Hey, Charlie. Does the hotel have a gym area? Izuku asked his cousin as he took a seat. You're seeing it too, right? Ochako whispered to Tenya. I mean, I saw something during the entrance exam when he saved me, but everything had been so chaotic I didn't really notice. Tenya hadn't noticed anything when they changed in the locker rooms at UA, although that was more because he made it a point not to look at anyone when changing in a communal place. It would make sense given his quirk, and the fact that he was trained by All Might, he whispered back. I mean, I thought he was cute when I first met him, Ochako admitted without shame, although Tenya blushed since he had thought the same back then as well, but Izuku is fucking hot. I mean, sure, the muscles are nice, but his food is amazing. Tenya did agree. I'm still wondering why he's wearing a skirt. You're right, we should get a gym added to the hotel. Charlie poked Izuku with her elbow. Thanks for the idea. While Tenya and Ochako had their own conversation, Charlie and Izuku had been discussing the hotel having a gym. It's a good place to blow off steam without getting into fights. Having things like that here should be really helpful with helping people find redemption. Izuku crossed his legs as he leaned forward. That reminds me, do you think you could get some books on the various types of demons that reside within hell? I don't want to accidentally do anything wrong when trying to help out around here. I'll place an order. By the way, what's with the skirt? It looks good on you. Charlie ate one of the scones that Izuku had made after feeding his friends. Thanks. Nifty actually made it for me. She is a whiz with a sewing machine. As for why I'm wearing it, it's comfy. Izuku's simple response got a chuckle out of his cousin. We're probably going to see Izuku in other outfits like that, aren't we? Tenya asked. If you get a bloody nose, you're on your own, Ochako said, some blood leaking from her nose already. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share the video and support the original writer. See you in the next video?